Okay, I did that. It will start streaming in a moment. We should be live. Yeah, we are live.
Good.
Hey, Hall, thank you so much for joining the Saturday.
It is
Uh,
fun.
Thanks, Magnus. Thanks for accepting our invitation to speak from our meetup group. Let me
Absolutely.
introduce. Let me introduce Magnus. Magnus, to you. Thank you so much. I
Oh,
will
it's nice.
remove myself from the stream.
Thanks. Let's see. I'm looking at my login here this morning, unfortunately. Um, Give me 1 second to ensure that I am all signed in. I have a demo that I wanted to share later, possibly. And I was all signed in yesterday, very nice. And today it's not really doing me any favors. That's okay if it doesn't work right now. We can still get going. Just check. Yes, that works. Good. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session. And today we're actually going to talk then about effective access control in Azure. It's a big topic, and the main thing to know about it is I think that most people don't get it right. So I have made this actually new presentation to talk a little bit about that, because I see that security is a great adoption blocker. Access control is a great adoption blocker for people that are trying to use the cloud. Maybe they're new to the cloud, but they want to go there, and they're not doing the access properly. I see all kinds of chaos with my customers that I work with, kind of like, how do I avoid human error? We would like to maybe not have as many people involved, and when people are involved, there's going to be mistakes. And how can we manage that? How can we handle this situation? Well, the easy answer is don't give access, but it's also difficult if you have a job to do. So let's get the job done. Let's do it. Well, so what do we do then? We give everybody all access to all the things. So all the developers own the subscriptions. And then we will generalize that and we will automate, tomorrow. Coincidentally, that's exactly the same time that I'm also going to the gym tomorrow. And then whose database is that? Is that your database? Is it yours? I don't know. Whose database is this? It's costing us money, but we don't know exactly whose this is. We are not able to take responsibility for the things that we have because access is screwed up. So basically, we have issues, right? And that's pretty scary. And so how do we approach this thing? How do we become a little bit more zen among these issues we have? So good news is that the tools to manage access are already in the Azure platform. They're already there, and actually more of them are coming. I'm going to show a preview feature today. And you need to study, you need to understand and make it easy for you to be secure and effective, because Azure will prevent criminals and errors, and it will tell you when something is wrong, only if you know how to access those features, of course. The whole thing, of course, in Azure with access starts with something called RBAC, or role-based access control. That allows you to set secure access with very granular permissions. You can assign this access to users, to groups of users, to service principals, and even to managed identities. We're not talking so much about service principals and managed identities today. We're talking more about the access itself. Access have built-in roles that I'm going to show you a little of, and that makes it easy for you to get started. But if you want to be really, really specific, you can create your own custom roles to offer greater flexibility. So that's good too. When it comes to access, there are three parts, there are three elements to access control. It's who is getting access, and what are they getting access, what are they able to do when they get access? And then where are they having this access? What can they access? And a challenge here in this context is that the Azure objects, the users, the security groups and these things, they are stored in Azure Active Directory. But the access you are granting is not happening in Azure Active Directory. It's actually happening in Azure. So you're storing a bit of metadata about the access granted with the service itself, with Azure. So the Active Directory doesn't actually know if you have access to Azure. It needs to go and ask Azure to find out who has access. So let's take a look about these roles first. A role have a definition, and then you take that definition and you assign it to someone. So a contributor role can be assigned to me, perhaps. So the definition itself defines a set of actions that you can do, and also, in fact, not actions. I use it sometimes, but not very common, these not actions. So you can say, oh, you have access to all of this except that. But a set of actions that you can perform is in your role. And a couple of examples are, of course, the built-in reader role, contributor role. Those are pretty general, high-level roles. They can access a lot of things when granted to a scope. But more specific, maybe, I'm a website contributor. I work with this website. I can access that. Or maybe a custom role like web app slot swapper, which is a custom role that I have created and as an example of a very specific access. Then you take the role and you assign it with that role definition, and you assign it to an identity with a given scope. That's the role assignment. So that's the thing we talked about just now. What has access, or what access do I have? Sorry, what access do I have? Who is getting this access? And where am I getting the access? Okay, that's the role assignment. So if I go here to Azure, and this is the Azure portal here, I click on a subscription, and then I go to access control, and then I go to, you see here, there's role assignments and add. That's where probably most people hang out. But there's also roles. I don't know how many of you have ever clicked on that thing. You get a list of all the roles that are possible to have in your context right now. In my case here, I searched for web, and I found a couple of roles, a web plan contributor and a web site contributor. Those are built-in roles in Azure, built by Microsoft, put in Azure for you, that you can start to take advantage of. For those of us who know, a website has to belong to a web plan, and a web plan can have many websites belonging to it. The web plan is what controls the scale of your site, and the website itself is what controls the specifics for one website instance. But there's also here my custom role, my web app slot swapper also exists in here in this context. So I have created that and put it here. So if we go to the website contributor, you can, for any role, find the permissions of the role in the Azure portal. So you click on that and you see which resources, which providers of resources do I have access to. There's some Azure Monitor, Resource Health, and some things. And of course, a lot Microsoft Web App stuff. If you drill down into this, you'll see a long, long, long list of actions, of things, operations that I can do, things that I can take, change and modify, read, write, delete, and all the things. And it's kind of interesting that there are so many. So just for this example here, I executed this. This is now in Visual Studio Code, right? If I say get Azure provider, AZ provider operation, I ask it for what are the operations I can do on the Microsoft.web context, on the web provider for Microsoft, for the app services. And if I list all those operations, I get things like this, describing all the different things that I can do, right? And then if I count how many are there, I say measure object, select object, expand property, count, I get 494 different actions on the Microsoft Web provider only. So there's like lots of providers, and so there's all of these resource providers, they specify these actions, and the roles then consist of a set of actions that you can specify, exactly these actions. And then there are many resource providers and very many actions. So there's a lot of opportunity here to do very specific things and to do pretty cool things with the roles, to specify exactly the roles that you might need. So the built-in roles are really useful to begin with. And we'll take a look at the custom roles later. Now, scope. So what about the scope? You may have seen pictures like this. What is this trying to depict? In fact, this picture had only these grid-looking things and the keys, which are subscriptions, Azure subscriptions. And then I added some things here to the right. So management groups in Azure, that's pretty much about access control. And where do you want to have access to, and so on and so forth. In this case here, you always have a so-called root management group where everything starts in your Azure tenant. And beneath that, or in that tree that you see here before you, all of your resources in Azure will be. Maybe your company only has one subscription, and that's okay. But if you belong to a large organization, you probably have a tree like this with different areas and departments and things. So if I were to grant access over here, for example, as a contributor to this subscription, to this subscription scope here, now I have access to this. It means that I have access to, of course, all the resources. This is a resource group, and here are resources in my subscription. This is a web application here. What happens if I add another resource group with another application? Well, my access extends to those things that I create in the future as well, which is both a good and a bad thing. If you know what you're doing, then it's good. But I've also seen a lot of unintentional access being granted this way because people didn't realize that more people that shouldn't have access to this environment now suddenly have. Another example, if I'm reader here in production, I can see all of production, then I can see everything in there. Even if I in the future go and add another subscription in here, I will have access to read that as well in the future. So that's the scope concept as such. It's hierarchical, and you can set a level of scope all the way from a management group, even the root management group, all the way down to actually the scope can be just one instance of a resource. So now I'm going to tell you a scary story about ghosts and zombies. Once upon a time, there was a ghost named Casper and a zombie named Dave. They worked at this company. And you can see here that Dave and Casper have access to a resource group here called Zombies and Ghosts. You go into the resource group, you click access control and the role assignments, and I filter down to the read access here. You can see that these people have access, or this zombie and this ghost have access. And then one day, Casper and Dave, they decide to leave the company. They move on. They go to somewhere else and work. And what happens is, in Azure is this. Dave, well, he's a zombie. And then Casper, he's a ghost. Well, so Casper, as you see here, he's gone. And what is that about? The identity is not found. I told you before that Azure... access to Azure is stored in Azure. So there's a bit of metadata saying Casper has access to this resource group. Now, if we go to the Active Directory and we delete the object Casper from the Active Directory, it's gone now. Well, the thing is, Azure still remembers that this object was given access. And when it tries to take the object identity and look up the name for Casper, Active Directory comes back and says, I don't know this identity. I don't know what that is. and you end up with a ghost in Azure. Something had access at some point. It doesn't anymore, but it's just hanging out there. That, for me, is really frustrating and annoying. I see that all over Azure, companies that have ghosts hanging around. What about Dave then? He left the company, but he's still there. So, okay, so later, months later, somebody is trying to figure out what the zombies and ghosts application is about, and they see that Dave has access. Oh, let's go talk to Dave. That's probably a good idea. And then they go and ask, and they find out, well, Dave, he left the company 3 months ago. He doesn't work here anymore. Why does Dave still have access? Well, his account is still remaining in the Active Directory, but probably since he left, it's been disabled. So nobody can sign in as Dave, or Dave cannot sign in anymore. But the actual object is still there, and the access granted to Dave is still present, which is so annoying. So what I suggest is that you avoid granting access to users in Azure and give access only to groups. Here's a case where we have a group that has access, an access group. This is an Active Directory security group, and it has access here. And that means that any member of this group also has access here. So that's the end of my story. And then I'm going to show you now a suggested approach for how to handle access. Here is a subscription and some resource groups and some resources. And here are some people that work in the company. Here's a department. We call that department foo. I can create a user group for the entire department. Everybody who works in the department, they are in the user group foo. And then I say, well, here are all of our Azure resources. Everybody in the department should have access to read these resources. So in Azure, I create an access group, and I grant that green access group in my Active Directory read access in Azure. And then I create an association. I make the user group access a member of the access group, which means that everybody in the department now can read the thing. Another example, there's a team here with some people working, and they apparently need to be contributor at these specific resources. And we do the same thing here. We can create a team group and the access groups in Azure, and we grant access to the groups. So anyone who's in the groups can have access. Now, in this case here, what about if we make the team leader here, Tina, we make her the owner of the access group, owner of the user group, the team group. And then if Cesar joins the company, well, then Cesar can be added to the access group by Tina. Because Tina is the owner of an Active Directory group, then Tina can add more members to the team, which is really good because that means that we are sort of delegating a bit of access control. So Tina has the ability to grant specific access, in this case, contributor to specific resources that belongs to the team. This is compared to setting Tina up as the owner of the groups and the resources. Owner in Azure can grant any access at all, any type of access, and revoke any type of access. But that, for me, is a very wide, open-ended access control, because Tina can then do whatever Tina wants, add, remove, change, anything. It's a little weird to give that much access when you only actually needed to do this one thing, contributor. So the benefits of this grouping group approach is that the Azure Active Directory graph sort of knows who has which access to what in Azure. And when I say sort of knows, is because it doesn't actually know, but the naming convention we use to say that, this specific group has read access to that, I can write this and I can use this information in my Active Directory to figure out, that probably means that there's contributor access in Azure. It doesn't actually know the Active Directory, but it sort of knows, and it's better this way. We don't have any ghosts and zombies hanging around in Azure, and that's a good thing. We like that. And we can delegate specific access management to, in this case, Tina, who was able to give specific access. So what is the right scope for access? We have this hierarchy, like I said, inherited hierarchy like a tree. Here's one branch of the tree, a management group, subscription, resource group, and a resource. What is a good level to give access? Well, if you look at the management group, it's a very powerful level to give access to. You should definitely only give limited access here, like reader, so you don't give powerful contributor access or something like that. You should probably not use permanent access assignments if it's more high-level access like contributor or something. You should definitely try to stay away from that. Maybe administrators, maybe operations can have access here, but they shouldn't have permanent access. In the subscription level, that's a common place to give access, to saying, oh, the team has its own subscription. The thing I see about that is that it leads to a wasteful behavior, because if the whole team can have full access of a whole subscription, it means that they start getting into a habit of, oh, I'll create my own resource group and some resources. And that's going to lead to wasteful behavior. It's going to lead to dirt hanging around resources that shouldn't be there. It's going to accelerate cost. It's going to grow cost over time. And also, the issue with giving access to a whole resource a subscription is that if somebody decides to deploy a whole new application, it's not super intuitive for them to understand that maybe they're giving too much access now. That's a common mistake, to give access at this level. All the way down to the resources, well, yes, if you have something like a like a database admin or something, then yeah, absolutely. It is difficult to maintain, though. It's too granular at this level. It can be complex to handle. What I feel is that the most appropriate level for access control is to say, okay, you get access to these resources, all the resources in this group. That gives a very clear and good separation of concern for me. And it's easy to maintain that your application is maybe consisting of 5 resource groups. Good. The team has access to these 5 resource groups, and everything in there belongs to the team. It's very clear, it's very concise, and it gives a good level of granularity. So if I were to recommend, I would say that you should focus access control efforts at the resource group level. What about custom roles? Okay, so let's go and create a custom role web app swapper. Well, I have actually some code for that. And here is Visual Studio code in full screen mode. I'm just going to walk through this code. There is an action to swap a production slot with another slot for a web application. It means that you deploy a staging site. You have the production in production, and you have a staging site, and you want to swap locations between these two. So staging becomes production and vice versa. So there's a specific action for that, and a specific action to swap slots as well. So there are 2 actions for this. And then what you can do is create a whole role for this. In my case here, I already created it in Azure. So I'm going to get a specific role here from Azure, another role called website contributor. That role looks like this. These are the properties of it, what it has access to. I can list the access that this role has. In fact, how to create new roles on the command line is to take an existing role and remove the identity, the unique identity, and put your own role name and description in place. And then again, with these actions that we had, remember we had these actions here. I clear out the actions and I put my own specific actions in there. And then a role can also be restricted to where it's possible to assign it. In this case, I said that it's possible to assign to a certain subscription, this role. And then I said that this is a custom role. Now, if I look at the role now, it's a web app slot swapper, custom role with a description and some 2 very specific access items that I can do. Only two actions, nothing more, nothing fancy. This is a very specific role and a very simple one. It's not as complicated as the larger roles that have all kinds of access. So all I need to do now is take my role definition and put it into Azure. That's how that is handled. And then our delivery manager can go and use this when we have deployed a staging site, and then go to Azure to deploy. Over in Azure, we have the ability here to go in Azure and see for maybe this resource group here, I can go and say, add role assignment, and then I can select the role, web app slot swapper, and then I can see who. Well, Dave is back. He works at my company again. So demo Dave gets access. This is to give a person access here in Azure, and I recommended that you didn't do it. So I can actually go and say demo group and give a group a certain access in Azure. That's nicer. So we're not going to do that now. We're actually going to go back to our presentation instead. And talk about privileged identity management. So privileged identity management, if I grant access to someone, they're going to get it permanently. But privileged identity management is just-in-time access. And so what does that mean? Well, rather than having a permanent access, the user is eligible to have a certain access. It doesn't have it all the time, but they can request to activate the role in a given scope and get access. And that request can be granted or it can be denied. And it's always audited, which is good, because then you can see who has requested access, who has been given access, who has been denied access, and so on in the audit logs. So let's walk through a scenario here with the delivery manager, Dave, who wants to swap a version of the website into production. We have a staging slot, we have staged a new version, and we want to go to production. Here is the website. It says version 1. This is in production. You can see the URL for production up here. And then the other site is -staging. That's my other Azure App Service slot. That's version 2, the new version we're going to put in production. The thing is, when Dave goes into the app service here to do this swap action, you can see that Dave does not have access. And if you go to the deployment slots of this, it also says you don't have write permission, you don't have swap permission, you can't do it. So Dave cannot do his job. Well, then the manager, me, I get to assign privileged identity management to Dave. So yeah, I go to privileged identity management in the portal, and I click on Azure Resources, the resource group itself, where I want to do to allow the access. And then I go to assignments, and I add a new assignment. I select the role, web app slot swapper, and I give access to, in this case, specifically demo Dave. And then I decide how long is this eligibility available. It expires after a while, and then I assign that. So now demo Dave is able to ask for permission to do the swapping. So now Dave asks for permission because he receives an email says, I assigned the role to you for this resource group. So now you know you have this role or the ability to have this access. Well, then Dave goes in and checks, well, what are my roles that I have? There we go. This is the role that I have. That's right. I was going to say that I always click the wrong thing here, and I did even now that I was demoing. You have to click, this is Azure AD roles, no results, right? You're confused now. You have to click on Azure Resources to find the Azure access that you have. Okay, cool. I can be a web app slot swapper. Now I want to activate this. I type motivation. Why do I want to activate this role? Why do I want to have this access? Click activate. And then this is pending for approval. Now it goes back to the manager, to me. I actually get this email in Swedish because it was localized, which was funny. It says, approve or reject Demo Dave's request to activate the web app slot swapper role. I go to Azure. I can see that there's a pending request for Dave. I can go to approve requests, select this request from Dave. I can read the reason why Dave wanted the access. I can opt to approve, give a motivation. The new version looks cooler. And then I can confirm. That actually now says that, it sends me another email, Magnus again, me, saying that, okay, Demo Dave's request has been approved by myself. And then I also get an email that says, Demo, and this was not localized, so it's funny. Demo Dave has activated the web app slot swapper role. Okay, now I know as a manager that this role has been activated. Okay, so now Dave tries again. Your web app slot swapper role is now active, is the message that Dave receives after I approved it, right? So Dave goes back to Azure and looks at the eligible assignments again and clicks on active assignments to see, indeed, I have activated this access now. I can do this now. So I go back to my subscription or to my resource group where I want to do the web app slot swapping. Go back to my app service instance. And in fact, I now have access, or Dave now has access, right? So Dave can now click on the swap action, which wasn't accessible before, right? He had to ask his manager for approval to be allowed to go to production. He can do it, but he needed to get the sign off first. And then you go into the swap action, you click on swap, and it takes a little while. And then, in fact, the website has been swapped. So that means now that when we go to the staging site, it now contains the old production version 1. And if I go to the production site, it now contains version 2. So the value of having privileged identity management is that you can give least privilege, and you can give someone access only to the few things that they needed with a custom role, and then just-in-time access, even with approvals. Approval part is actually optional. You can have that it is allowed to elevate this role anytime. You can require multi-factor authentication here if you feel that you want to make very sure that it's actually Dave and no one else signing in pretending to be Dave. They also have to do multi-factor authentication. There are different ways to configure this. What happens is that you are not giving out permanent access, so there's less risk for error. And in many scenarios, this can actually be the appropriate level to be on. So I just want to also mention here that privileged identity management works with groups as well. So remember this picture here where we had a team, and the manager was adding Cesar to the team here to join the team. And now these people have permanent access to these resources in here. It's okay, but it's not great because that was contributor access, if you recall. And that means that, someday suddenly, Bob here decides that, okay, well, great, I can go and change this configuration because I need to try something out. And then Bob has to run home. Maybe he has a sick dog or something to take to the veterinarian. So he has to rush home, and he forgets that he changed this thing. And now the rest of the team are experiencing some weird behavior that they cannot understand or explain. And it leads to just sloppiness in general, right? So rather than doing this groups in groups access only, this is a great way to do it. And I use it myself a lot. If I wanted to give group PIM access, it would look a little bit something like this. And this is a preview feature still. It's not in general availability with Microsoft yet. So the team members are not in the group. I create a group, and I give the group contributor access, in this case, to these resource groups here, let's say. You can have anyone who is a member of this group is a contributor to all of these resources. And then we configure PIM for these individuals on the team. to say, well, you don't have membership, but you're eligible to have membership. And then what we need to do, if, for instance, Bob actually does need to make a change in these environments, is that Bob can ask, can I elevate my access to be contributor? And Tina can say, yes, I approve. And then effectively, Bob will be activated to be a member of this group. And this group has contributor access to the resources. And Bob can do his job and go in and fix the thing he needed to do. But he doesn't have permanent access to do it. Maybe this is a production area, right? And production can be super sensitive. We want to be careful with what we do in production. So I think it's an important distinction that that you give specific access. High-level access is only given when you need it, and you don't have it all the time. The Azure Active Directory, the Azure Activity Log is a place where you also need to go in Azure and check. So here for my resource group, Zombies and Ghosts, I can click on the activity log and I can see all the role assignments that have happened. I can see any action that has, any deployment, anything at all that has happened. But I was playing around with a bunch of role access things here. And so I have lots of these logged access grants. And if I click on that information, I can see exactly what was given and what happened. And I can see the whole specific JSON related to this request, exactly what was granted by whom, where was this happening, and who was given access, and so forth. All of this data might seem a little bit big and daunting, and it's like, wow, this is a lot of information. How can I even process this? The thing you can do, which is great, hi Stephen, the thing that you can do is click on a new alert rule, and this alert rule window pops up saying that, okay, whenever any access is granted, please send me an alert, and you can go and configure this so that you can keep track of exactly which access is being changed. So now you can have this alert rule to notify you that access was changed in our environment. And if you're a security officer, that's maybe something you need to keep track of to see who is setting up access here. What we are targeting with this, the goal of this whole thing that we want to do here with granting access to groups and setting a group owner and things like that, is that we're working towards being accountable. Accountability is so empowering and so important in Azure. You have to be able to, as a worker, be able to be accountable. You need to have, of course, access to the things you need to do your job. Maybe you have read access everywhere, and then you can go and get elevated access to production when you need to make a change inside of production. You need to be able to have access to the things that you need. If that configuration in detail is not available, you still need to be able to do your job. And what happens then is that maybe your manager, this is the more common scenario, gives you just access to the whole to the whole subscription, permanent access. Well, you're technical people. You go and figure that out. You have all the access to it. And that leads to all these problems where all of a sudden I have access to everything, and it just feels that you're less accountable. You become a little bit anonymous. It's not like you asked for a specific access for a specific purpose anymore. So it becomes dirty with old resources. You maybe decide that you're smart, you know exactly what to configure. And so you go and make this change, and your team members are unaware, and all of a sudden it's confusion. So also another thing about accountability is that then what that means is that you don't want to be burdened with having too much access, because that's just really hard to handle for anyone. If you have too much access, you all of a sudden are able to just create any resource you want. And if somebody creates a new resource group, you are also a owner of that resource group, and you can change their application, or you just run a script and you intended to run that only on your resources. But now that somebody else created additional resources in the subscription, you didn't notice. You run your script, and now you're affecting their resources as well. So you're burdened with too much access all of a sudden. And so taking away access from the people who work in a team on a project is actually not taking something away. It's you have to start thinking about it as you're actually getting a sort of a gift. You only have access to the things that you need to have access to in order to do your job well. So if you can, as a worker, as a team member, as someone, a team responsible team leader, if you can control your environment, you're also possible for you to take responsibility for this environment, take responsibility for the cost and the performance and the function of the things that you are running. Very often I see the opposite. I see that a lot of people are getting too much access, and it's causing all kinds of problems. It's good business maybe for someone like me. I get to go in and fix things, but it's not. It's also frustrating to see when access is being too frivolous, because people all of a sudden can just go ahead and do crazy things. And I don't like it. All right. We have come to the question section of this talk. Do we have any immediate questions here today?
Hey, we have one.
Only one? That's great.
I mean, he's a regular guy, and he posts a lot of questions.
Oh, this is great. This is a great question. Yeah. Yes, wonderful. So what is the difference between access control and access policies? Okay, so access control is what we have talked about the whole session. It's about granting access to an object, to a user, a human maybe, or to a guest user, or to a service principal, which is more like a machine account or a managed instance. It's giving access to someone to go in and do something. But policy is more about the resources themselves, about the shape of the resources, about the type of the resources, and such things. So they are kind of complementary, but the policies are not targeted towards the user. The policies are targeted toward the resources. So you could say things such as, it's not really access policies. The question is, what are access policies? More like Azure policies. And the policies can be something like, well, you're only allowed to deploy your databases inside the country of India, right? You maybe cannot deploy your databases in Southeast Asia or the US. By policy, you may only deploy them in certain regions. So in this case, only databases are allowed in the regions of the 3 Azure regions in India. Or maybe anything, right? We disallow using very large instances of VMs maybe in the company. You're not allowed to create the largest VMs because they're so massively expensive, and we don't allow that big expense. So these, that's sort of the difference between access control for humans and policies that kind of govern the resources themselves. It's a great question, though. It's a very good question.
Yeah, he's a guy who makes a lot of queries, and I really like his questions. And thanks, Prem.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a good question. Okay, so we're almost out of time, I guess. Any additional question now?
Oh, I saw only one query from Prem. I don't see any other queries. Mohit?
Hey, Swami, and hey, Magnus. Excellent session.
Thank you.
You have been a great speaker. We have been listening to you since ages now, and it's always lovely to hear you. Always lovely to hear you.
You're so nice.
Yeah.
We are very lucky.
Can I just have a closing? Have one more sort of summary, just quick to sum up. That
yes, please.
For everyone. So we have to use these built-in roles where we can. I see that people just say, okay, I'm going to use the contributor role. Well, there may be a much more appropriate, smaller role for you, right? And then even smaller than that, you can make your own custom roles to, in this case, the web app slot swapper, right? You get the very specific access. And then if you want to give the best scope level, I think that you should focus on the resource group, not give subscription access. I think it's too big, too wide, too large access to give subscription access. That's what I often see people do. And sometimes they can be successful with that as well. Grant access using these security groups in the Active Directory so that you don't get ghosts and zombies inside of Azure. And then just-in-time access, privileged identity management, it's just a wonderful thing to start looking into and start using. So in production, nobody has permanent access. They can only get access if they ask for permission to enter that environment. And so it's really important. And then, of course, the access control that I gave you the hint there to set up alerts when access changes. Somebody should be alerted. Somebody should keep tabs on those changes. Anyway, that's it. That was all I had. My final summary slide. So I hope you enjoyed this.
Oh, really? I've learned. Mohit, to you, Mohit. Sorry, I cut you. Sorry. Go ahead, Mohit.
No problem, no problem. Thank you, Magnus, for the excellent session. I do have a question though. What's your view on privilege access management? Means I know you have covered it slightly in your session, so that we can add people to a specific group. But I want to understand more about it, how we can manage it in a enterprise server, because I have a specific scenario to be precise, that I want eligibility of some people from different departments to be able to get into that group, because I personally work with operations, but I have few coordinates in from development department and from consultant department who has to look into my Azure infrastructure as well, point in and point out, and maybe help me doing this troubleshooting sessions and to figure out issues happening with the application. So how do we manage access to those kind of people who should not have good privileges, but maybe we will need it at some point of time?
Or just like temporary, just for a little while.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a challenge, right? Because that's when I see technically that people tend to give, full owner access instead, right? So somebody, maybe you get ownership of the whole subscription, right? You own it, which means effectively that you can add and remove access, any kind of access to anyone, to anything in this whole thing. And it's a very big responsibility to have that access. And even more, I often see that people get this on a permanent assignment, right? So your user account is always the owner of the whole subscription, and there's maybe mission critical production level applications running in this subscription. From a compliance and security standpoint, that's abysmal, right? If somebody hacks into your account, all of a sudden they have full control of everything. And so that just doesn't work well. So how do you then do it if you cannot be the owner, but you have to be able to give someone access? Well, either you can give them access or you can't, right? Well, yes, but what you do then is that you build and invest a little bit. You have to actually invest in building this. You invest in allowing people to make a request for access with a self-service desk instead. So they themselves cannot give the access, but you make a little implementation to which they can go and say, or you could in this case go and say, okay, these users here, I want to give them access, temporarily access to read the resources in this subscription. And that access you can then have activated by someone else. And if you have people doing that, that's one thing, but it may take some time to get that access, which is why I tend to work towards setting that up with an automated request.
Mm-hmm.
So then we can configure that you are allowed to give access, but you can't do it yourself. So you can make a request to have access set up for you.
Mhm. Means we have set up PIM, and I always advise everyone to set up PIM as much as
Yeah,
possible and make use of it,
of course.
and have the only reader capabilities by default as the
Yeah, yeah.
permanent
Read
group,
access is fine. Yeah,
right? But for something like this, where I have to give access to people who are outside my department, for example, who should
yeah,
not have readers access as well on a normal basis, but I
yeah,
just
yeah,
want to give them access for a specific period of time. And
yeah,
that too, I was wondering if I can use this privilege group access, this the new capability around PIM, right, where I can add people to the specific group. They can
yeah,
activate themselves to the
yeah.
group, and that group has the access to the maybe a reader
Exactly.
role.
That would be the way to do it, and it's still preview feature, this group access thing that you saw there, but it's really good because if you're the group owner of the group in Active Directory, it means that you
Hmm.
can add and remove members to it, right? So you have the ability to choose to allow a new person to be eligible to have access to this group, and then they can come and ask you. You go and ask them, maybe I need some help over here. Bob, can you come and help me? Okay, great. Bob says I will make a request to get access, and then you can look at the access request and you can grant the access, and Bob can come in and have access. And the great thing about PIM is that it's time limited, right? You can set it for
Right.
only 4 hours for the maybe the end till the end of the day, and then when Bob goes home, his access is in fact automatically revoked. So even if somebody were to hack into Bob's account, he doesn't have the access anymore.
Good.
Yeah, so definitely this is I'm very excited about the group access feature. I'm going to we're working to take good advantage of this as well.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah,
I also have a question around giving an access to a group itself. You mentioned that it's instead of giving access by an individual contributor, we add people to the group and then give access to a specific group. This is
yeah,
what I have been doing throughout my career as well. I think it's a good advice.
yeah.
But recently we have faced a issue, and the issue was it was from IT that a person, employee was wrongly added to this group, and we had no idea about it. It was a
Oh,
manual error because IT added someone mistakenly,
right. Not the right
because
person. Yeah.
not, yeah.
Mhm.
And now all of a sudden, this person has the access to the whole infrastructure that I have, and
Right.
it's very challenging to make it secure because I don't want to expose all these details or all the access to anyone outside my department, to be
Mhm.
precise, right?
Yeah.
I don't want it. So how do we monitor this? Uh, one thing is keep on checking my groups. It's not possible for me to keep on
No,
checking
it's
these
not.
groups,
I
right?
agree. So the all the membership changes uh, are audited. So you can have, if something is audited, it can go into a log analytic workspace. And if
Mm-hmm.
it's data that goes into log analytics as an audit trace saying, okay, Bob was granted access to the following, then it's in fact possible to follow up on the data. You would still need to set up rules and see if there is some way you can capture access grants. Maybe if it's production, it's such an important thing that any access change to production needs to maybe be reviewed by a person.
Mm-hmm.
There's someone that has to check this and double check that was in fact the correct access. Then you can do it that way. You can set up so that anytime any new member is joined to a group which is related to production, uh, there's an alert sent that requires a manual check off by someone to go and validate that was a correct access, and validate that and check it off. That would be the way to do it. It's of course could be a really big job to do something like that, but it would require that if it's audited only and
Mm-hmm.
there's just information about it, but nobody ever looks at that information, then why audit it in the first place? It doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
yeah. Yep.
I don't know if
Absolutely.
that helps. I mean, it's this is a difficult area, of course. Accidentally granting access. Oh, I didn't think that was this. Oh, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, that's that.
Mhm. One more question. You said that adding people to a resource group ever giving access to the most granular level. Of course,
Yeah.
resource group is not the most granular. It's the actual resource, but resource group is like one of the most granular form you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
reach out to, right? But don't you think it's very difficult to manage access to resource group ever, because then you have given access to resource group and then you have hundreds and thousands of resource groups,
Mm.
and auditing it and managing the access would be troublesome, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
In those scenarios.
Yeah, if you have hundreds and thousands of resource groups, right?
Mm,
I can completely see the challenge, and it's possible to be successful with access control at the subscription scope as well.
mhm,
The thing to know is to be very specific. Having more subscriptions, do you know exactly what that gives you? It gives you more subscriptions. There is no technical reason to have more subscriptions, right? It doesn't give you any certain advantage at all. You get all the same technology, all the same things that you're able to do. If you decide that our scope is not subscription, our scope of access, our scope of our unit of deployment is resource group, right? But
mhm,
it's also possible to be successful at the subscription scope access level. It's just that I have seen very many scenarios where unintended effects come into to be, right? Like I said, somebody else also has access to the same subscription, and they go and create a new resource group with some new resources on it. I didn't know, nobody told me. And so now that I run my script to do something, I'm changing their resources as well.
mhm,
All those unintended effects have a big cost, right? So where do you want to pay? Do you want to pay with wrongful access, unintended costs, unintended effects that you didn't were not really able to control, or do you want to pay the cost of setting up more specific access to begin with, where you say, okay, team A has resource group ABC or 123, right? Team B has resource group 456.
mhm,
That's more complicated to set up, but it also makes it so that a team member of team A can never possibly affect the resources in the resource group 456 that belongs to the other team, right?
mhm,
So it's a question of where you want to pay the cost. There's no right or wrong answer, because it also depends on what you do with this access. If you say, okay, team A has this subscription, team B has that subscription, that can actually be effective too. So there's no right or wrong, it's just trade-offs.
mhm. Agreed. Totally agreed. I
Yeah.
do have a related question on the subscription level itself. Where do you think it's better to put policies? For example, I will give you a scenario.
Yeah.
You're saying that it's not very wise to use multiple subscriptions. It's always means a lot of subscription doesn't help anyone, and I do agree to your point actually.
Mm.
I think it's over a period of time it creates more mess and it's become more difficult to manage those
Mm.
subscriptions. But what do you think? It's better to have a separate subscription for your uh, production workload and separate
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
development QAs. Like,
I want to take you back to this picture that I had before, right? So this is there. Go search for. You'll find so many pictures like this. Right? This is an example picture. Setting up, and it just doesn't deal with. Well, actually, it does. There's a human resources development and test subscription over there, right? And
correct.
there's probably some human resources production stuff here, or maybe there's production only in these subscriptions, right? So the whole notion of having this tree of management groups where you have different departments, you can have a branch of the tree for development, another branch of the tree for production, test, whatever you need. I think you can have 6 levels in this tree if you feel
Yes.
so inclined. I don't think I've ever seen anyone use 6 levels because it's a lot, but
Yep.
but typically it looks something like this, along these lines, whatever makes sense to your organization. And here, at this level, Actually, I confirmed this with Microsoft recently, like a developer guidance gentleman I asked. So I use management group trees mostly for policies. Would you
Correct.
agree? And he said, yes, absolutely agree. So that the whole idea of having this tree with branches and different subscriptions and resources in different parts of the organization, that's basically about policy. Then you can say, okay, here in this node, here we set production policy. This is the law of policy inside of this branch of the tree, and everything beneath will be hit by these policies. But over here with development, we can be a little bit more free form over here. It's okay. We don't have to be so strict with policy in development.
Mhm.
So the management group tree is mostly about policy.
Yes. And this is what my question was actually. So, and I think you agree that it's better to put policies on the management group level than to the subscription or resource
It
group,
is.
right?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Mhm.
Then you can have, like here we have production. Then you can just go and add another subscription for another team or for another application. Do whatever you like, right? If you add another subscription, it's automatically governed by the policies of production. And that's
Correct.
that's definitely where you want to be with that.
Yep. Agreed.
Great.
Agreed.
All right. Who's the next speaker?
I am.
Oh my God, it's you! Oh, wonderful, wonderful. All right, well
Uh,
then I think maybe I'm out of time. I think, am I not?
oh, it is flexible. I mean, good
Yeah.
points or good content is
That's
coming
okay.
in. It is
Well,
benefiting everyone.
well, this
So
was wonderful. Anyway, I very much enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
thank you
It's a
so much
pleasure
for.
to speak with you or have a conversation with you, Magnus. Always
Hey,
been.
I am so sick from not being able to go to India. I miss India so much. I haven't been able to go. This whole pandemic thing is screwing with my travel agenda, and it's
Yeah.
screwing with more than my travel agenda, of course. But I really hope for the sake of this planet that we are out of this pandemic soon. But one of my first stops when I can travel again is to go back to India. I miss you guys.
Oh,
I
we'll be
remember
happy
your
to
first
host
trip.
the in person.
Yep.
We will be
So,
hosting an in person. Please let us know.
Thank you.
Mohit,
I will. I will. All
Mohit,
right.
anything from your side?
yeah, I just remember your first trip to India with Prabjot when you came to my session, Magnus, and then we had a blast after party, right?
I know. I
So
know. Oh God.
we are missing those days.
I'll be back in India soon.
We are waiting. We are waiting.
All right. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
thanks, Magnus.
Really appreciate it. Bye. Our next speaker is Mohit Chabra, and he's speaking on secure your infrastructure with Azure Sentinel. Uh, Welcome, Mohit.
Thank you
You
for
can please share your screen.
yes, please give me just 1 minute before I can set up my screen. I was so busy or occupied with listening to Magnus. He's so mesmerizing that I forget that I have a session as well. Uh, it's
No,
always
it
a
was
pleasure.
pretty good panel discussion. I really liked it. So a lot of real time information is coming in. I really enjoyed. Folks, Mohit and me, we are friends since past 6 or 7 years, and uh,
Make it eight, please.
yeah, it is. I'm sorry. I don't want to reduce one since past 8 years. And Mohit is my guru. He and Prakash Tripathi, these two people introduced me to community service. I still appreciate, even today, I appreciate these two people for introducing me. Mohit, I'm flashing your content onto the screen.
Please.
I pull myself out of the stream. Thank you so much. It's all yours.
Thank you, Swami. And I will say that I'm not anyone's guru. I just like to share my written knowledge that I have, and it's Swami's own passion that is bringing him here every weekend and to make sure that he's working for the community. I see he's presenting every weekend in somewhere, in whether in this meetup group or in some another communities across the world. So I think he's very passionate when it comes to technology, when it comes to learning, and also when it comes to sharing it with the community. So hats off to you, Swami, and thank you for organizing this sessions once again. It was a excellent session from Magnus. It's always a pleasure to listen to Magnus. He's one of the greatest MVPs out there. He's one of the best guys with Azure in the world. If you have been working with Azure, you might have heard about him, or you will hear about him sooner or later. So it was actually a pleasure to have him in our session. And after this, it's me. I will be talking about securing our infrastructure with Azure Sentinel today. And a little bit about myself. My name is Mohit Chhabra. I'm a Microsoft Azure MVP. And I've been working with Azure from last around 8, 9 years already. Since the time I've been working on it, I'm in love with Azure. I started working on it when it was the classic Azure, the version one of Azure. There were like only 15, 20 services in Azure, and look at the pace it has become now. So it's always been challenging to keep up with the pace of Azure, to continue our learning at the pace as they are growing. But I think sessions like these helps me, as well as helps everyone else to be in the community to learn and then share with each other. It's practically impossible to keep up on all the different streams that is happening in the Azure world, but I think the sessions like these can help you out in figuring out the confines or the conclusion or the crisp knowledge that people have gained in a specific domain across the years. So I think it's very useful, and it's a pleasure to present on these kind of sessions and share it with the community. So talking about Azure Sentinel, before I talk about what is Azure Sentinel, let's talk about what is happening in the world at this moment. So going back few years back, what used to happen is you used to deploy simple application, and that they were residing in servers and people were accessing it through mobiles. But during the last few years, the kind of data that we have in the world has changed drastically. Having said that, it's not just our mobile phones who's generating the data, it's a lot of other devices as well. So we have smart cities concept now. We have smart vehicles, we have smart sensors, IoT devices, IoT infrastructure. So I have a lot of data and different kind of data accumulating from all across the world, or all across my ecosystem that I have been living in. And of course, which means the tons of data, and of course the tons of variety of data as well. So it's not only the quantity which is increasing, it's also the variety of the data which is increasing. If you see the picture on the screen right now, you can see that okay, previously it used to say that okay, these are server data on premises that is generating the data, but right now every single thing is generating data. Even our light bulbs are generating data. Our light bulbs are becoming smart as well, and we are becoming dumb, but our systems are definitely becoming smart. With that, how do systems become smart? Of course, we take the data, we run some artificial intelligence over it, we make it smart enough to take decisions or follow instructions and then do some action based on those instructions. Maybe it's given by us, or it's given by some sort of AI in behind the scenes. So the whole digital estate has been built, and it had changed drastically in last 5, 6, 7 years. And if you see the challenge that is associated with it is to identify the security threats around it. Previously, you wanted to just manage your servers. You put defenders over there, you put firewalls over there, and make sure that you have tight security or over those. But how do you manage something like your vehicle? How do you make sure about security of those vehicles? How do you make sure security of your mobile devices, your smart homes systems? You have smart TVs, you have smart refrigerators, and all that stuff, right? It's becoming more and more difficult, right? So we need some sort of a system to manage this data, identify this data, and then create some sort of knowledge out of this data, because data is nothing but a lot of logs, right? So if you are not able to crisp those logs and then make some valuable outcome out of it, it's very difficult. So that's the idea behind it. So what are the traditional SOC challenges. What is SOC? SOC is basically Security Operations Center, and we have been running SOC. We have been running SOC from quite some time now. It's been years that people have their security department and have some sort of SOC setup, which means they run security operations and see that okay. The kind of issues that security incidents that they are facing into the environment right now, and they manage it, and then they create tickets around it, work on those issues, fix those issues, and close those tickets. So those whole workflow, or the whole logic of operations around managing the security incidents comes under SOC. But and SOC has been there since ages. It's not something new that came with cloud. It's been there since ages. But of course, as I said, that things have been changing frequently in the digital era. So things are becoming more and more difficult. So what are the SOC challenges traditionally that we have been facing? Of course, it's a high risk of it's a high challenging it's a challenge to deploy and maintain these environments, because setting up something like ArcSight or Splunk is very challenging, and then you have to make sure that you are not missing out on any of the data inputs, and then that can cause issue as well, and then upgrading it to new versions, making sure that you're on top of the new upgrades and all that stuff. It's very challenging. There are too many disconnected products, like your ecosystem as can have some products from Google, some from Microsoft, and then you have smart devices from Cisco, and then you have some servers from Cisco, whatever, right? So the all these products have their own data. They are producing their own data, but you need to have a common understanding of how this data can be collected into a single source, and then can be analyzed with a single source. So that's always been a challenge for a SOC, and it's very difficult to automate these things, because we don't know how to handle security incidents. We don't have enough data over a period of time as well to analyze security incidents. We do, and then completely automate it. We In the last few years, Microsoft has built few tools which can identify these things, and then build few and take some decisions on the basis of artificial intelligence. But automating it completely is still a long way to go, I would say. And sophistication of threats, if you ask me, because if security professionals are getting smart, I think the hackers, or the bad guys, right, as they say it in the movies, right, are getting much more smarter, so they are always one step ahead. And I personally think, as the security professional, as an IT guy, as someone who is responsible for managing the infrastructure of my company and my clients, it's some I can say that it's practically impossible to stop anyone from a threat. What we can do as security professionals or IT professionals to make it more and more difficult, and identify if there is any threat going around, and then make it in a situation that it's easier to identify, and then we can make some repulsions actions around it. So those are few issues, but one of the biggest issue is around the security skills as well. Like, security is still such a new topic in this world, right? We don't know how to handle it. The incidents are uh the incidents are getting sophisticated. If I'm not sure if you have heard about Gate, which was one of the recent incident happened with the Microsoft Defender. Maybe if you don't know about it, just read about it, and you will know that how sophisticated these kind of attacks are happening. So we don't have enough people as well in the world who knows this stuff, who knows who we can say they are domain experts. A handful of people, I would say, instead, who knows this field. So the demand and the supply for this is quite different. So demand is quite high, but the supply of individuals, or the resources, or the uh, skilled people is quite less comparatively. So that's a big challenge that we have as uh, as someone who has to manage the security. So solution, yes, we have a solution. We have a solution called Azure Sentinel. And what is Azure Sentinel? Azure Sentinel is a cloud native SIM. What does it mean? Right? You are also wondering what does it mean. So I'm going to explain it to you. So it's nothing but a security incident event management software where you can run your SOC with, but it's built for cloud. It's built for all those kind of data that I've been talking about with your IoT sensors, with your marketplace, with your smart devices, and blah blah blah. And it's powered with artificial intelligence. So Microsoft has done, because they have years of experience in managing security about Windows devices and non-Windows devices as well. They have taken all these years of experiences and all these years of data and then crunch it into their artificial intelligence to identify incidents automatically for you, and then take also some preventing action on it. So what you need your team, and the tool that is you need to manage the security incident is Azure Sentinel. So it's your SOC team plus Azure Sentinel, which is a uh, hosted managed service from Microsoft, which is built for cloud and designed for cloud natively. A lot of other competitors have also came into the market with their cloud offerings, and they were, but they were, most of them were not natively designed for cloud, whereas Azure Sentinel, I would say, was designed for cloud instead of building it and then pivoting it to a cloud based SIM solution. So what happens is, I told about Azure Sentinel is a SIM tool, but that's not completely true, because Azure Sentinel is a SIM solution, but also it's a SOAR solution. So it's a combination of SIM plus SOAR. So they are two different tools, but Azure Sentinel gives you all the access, all the things that you need for your intelligence, security, and analytics. What does SOAR mean? SOAR means security, orchestration, automation, and response. I know it didn't ring any bell to your mind, but let me explain it to you. SOAR means security orchestration, which means that whatever security incident you will identify using SIM, in this case it's more inside Azure Sentinel. So you will identify the incident and then look into the issues. But based on this incident, Azure Sentinel is smart enough to identify these incidents, do some automation around it, and then do some response as well. For example, if I have a user account which was logged in, uh, which is in India right now, and all of a sudden after 2 hours, if the same user account has been logged in from US, that means that something is wrong, right? A person cannot be in India and after 2 hours he cannot be in US. And if they identified, okay, this user account is not from a right IP, this user account has never logged in from this IP, that means someone else is trying to get into the account. And it can be a malicious attempt, or someone already have the access to this account. So that's something that Azure Sentinel is smart enough to identify, create an incident for you, also do some automation, like send an email to you or saying that, okay, this user account has seems to be compromised. Also, in response and automation, it can also block that account as well for the time being, to say that, okay, to make sure that they, as a preventive measure, if someone has the access to that account, to your user account, uh, we make sure that these users will be moved out of the system immediately, so that there is minimum damage occurred in the system. And what what it gives you is you have different connectors in Azure Sentinel, so you connect your different input source. So you collect that data over here, and then you detect. Let me go back to that screen. You detect those intelligent incidents that happens with AI. You can investigate it manually, and then you can respond them. Also, you can have some rules set up for commonly known incidents, and then automate those investigation and response as well. So it's Azure Sentinel can sit on top of your Microsoft 365 Security Center, your Azure Security Center, or any other third-party data sources. So your identities, your data, your email, your SharePoint, whatever, like can be part of your Microsoft 365 Security Center. Your Azure Security Center can look into your whole Azure data, and then any other third-party data sources that you have. Maybe you are running on premises, or you have some sort of firewall set up, and then you have some offices in different locations that you are connecting to. You have VPN setups and all that stuff. Can transfer this data to Azure Sentinel. So we have something called connectors in Azure Sentinel. What is a connector? Connector is basically an input source for Azure Sentinel. What does it mean? It means that from where you want to get the data out to the Azure Sentinel, what will be your input source for Azure Sentinel? As we talked about in our previous slide, this Azure AD, Azure ADP, these can be your connectors as well. Azure Security Centers can be a connector. Your Office 365 account can be a connector, and so on and so forth. Your activity routes can be a connector. Your firewall can be a connector. So there are a lot of connectors, and then it's basically publicly available on GitHub as well on what all connectors are there. You can build your own connectors as well, but the community is also growing. So you can keep a track of it, and Microsoft is also bringing a lot of connectors. They're investing heavily on their security side, whether it's Azure Sentinel or Azure Security Center. I'm a big fan of both of these services. They are investing heavily on these, and and what can happen is you can already see that in the pipeline you might have these connectors available already. If not, you can always bring your own connector and then build it and put it in the system. So I've already talked about Azure Sentinel and what it does and blah blah blah, but what is a SIM and what is a SOAR? So I'm going to skip on that, and just want to give you some sort of idea around it. So it's it is very challenging, and to ideally it is very challenging to set up these kind of solutions. I have worked with something like Arcside. It's these are like $1 million tools normally. It's it's needs a lot of skill set to set them up. Also, it needs a lot of infrastructure money as well in your pockets to set those up. So normally what you have to do is you have to set up the hardware, you have to set up the software on it, you have to spend a lot of money on maintaining it. But something like Sentinel is something that can be created with few clicks, and then you don't pay for actually managing those servers because it's a PaaS solution. So you only pay for what you're using. So based on the data ingestion that is getting into the Sentinel. So how much that so it depends upon the data that you're analyzing inside of the data that you have, or inside of these servers costs that you have already incurring. So as I said, it can integrate with any of the adjacent tools, and you can also this is beautiful. You can also introduce your own ML models. You can create your own ML models for something specific that you have for your security needs, and then put it on Azure Sentinel. And of course, there is a security community that you can put your models. Yeah, if you think it can be useful for others, then you can put it out in the GitHub as well, and then the community can you make a use of it. So time for some demo. let me go to my Azure portal. So let me come over here. So what we do is we have already created a log and with its workspace, and based on it I have created a Azure Sentinel. So I'm not going to recreate it. It's very simple. If you are working with Azure, you will know that creating anything is just a result that you have to put the required information, like the name of it, the location you want to host, and SKUs and all that stuff. So it's a straightforward thing that I don't want to waste your time on, and I've already created it like a cookie show, so that you see it's already created, and then I can directly jump onto the actual content, which is more useful for you guys. Before I jump to a demo, I will need 10-second break to drink some water, and then I can continue with the demo. Thank you. So I have created this Azure Sentinel workspace uh, over here. So I added this Azure Sentinel workspace right before this session. So I have since then I have 19 operations and then 41 Azure activities in the last 24 hours. So I can click on this. So if you see, the moment I click on this, I get to the logs, which is on the log analytics workspace. So there are different operations. Let me go over here. Yeah. So create a new OMS solution just now. Updated rules, authorization for blah blah blah. So all those are the activities that I have done in the last few minutes can be seen here. But let me come back to the Azure Sentinel and give you what are the different stuff over here. So over here we have incidents. So there are different parts to it. There is one part called SIM, one and another part called SOL. I'm going to show you both of them in this session. I don't have enough data to give you the right uh, experience, but I can definitely give you the overview of these activities or overview of these functionalities that we have. So first, I will talk about threat management, and we'll talk about incidents. What are incidents? Incidents is something that we identify that we have incident by a system, like someone is trying to get in. I told you about a scenario where a user is was trying to get in from US, whether and the same user was working from India. So that means someone else is trying to get this access. So that's an incident for you. So you will see that a ticket will be created over here automatically. You can see the number of incidents and what are the active incidents, and then you can have a full workflow of those tickets automatically, and then manage it. You can assign those tickets to an individual analyst, security analyst, and they can work on it, assign to another people, put comments in over, just like your service desk, Ziva, or any other ticket management tooling system. So before I go to workbook, I want to show you something called data connectors. So before we go to threat, let's see how we can set it up in the first place. So let me come over here, and we have 96 connectors available. I have connected to their few coming soon. Right now it's 0. But if you see over here, you can have, I was talking about different data connectors that we can have. So we can have Akamai security events. You can use your Akamai solutions and then connect it over here. Or you can also use your AWS accounts over here. So you can have your AWS accounts and then use this Azure Sentinel to manage your security across multi-cloud environments. For example, a lot of companies that I've worked with in the past few years have a multi-cloud strategy that some of their infrastructure is in Azure as a backup. They have their infrastructure in AWS as well. So and vice versa. So those kind of people can also connect AWS over here and then manage the security of that infrastructure as well from here. You can have Azure Active Directory connect to it. Let me ahead and connect to it. So we were talking about this security incidents, and for in the last session, Magnus was talking about different roles and access, and then we can look into the different signing and stuff, and then identify if there are any issues over here. So let me add this Azure Active Directory logs to here, and then create incidents if we found any sort of disparity. Similarly, we have Azure DDoS protection, Azure Defender. I can add those as well. And then steps, blah, blah, blah. I will come back to it and then show you. You can have Azure Firewall, Azure Key Vault, and all that stuff. But if I come down, I will show you. You can have your ELF logs. So you have the CEF. What is CEF? This is important to understand. CEF is Common Event Format. This is common across. It's like a universal language in the field of security. So all these security-based tools, firewalls, and all these devices, they speak in the form of CEF. Like if you are a developer, if you know, all of our applications are now speaking in the form of JSON. Previously, people used to speak in the form of XML. So it's something native, and every single client can understand that. It's similar to that. So CEF is a common language that all the security tools understand, and with this we can actually connect most of our uh, additional connectors that is not mentioned over here. So it's quite important to know about it. And then there are different stuff. You can connect your Google Workspace, you can connect your Juniper Workspace, your Microsoft 365, Cloud App Security, and so on and so forth. Microsoft Defender, and Office 365, Qualys, Symantec, Zscaler, and so on and so forth. So we have 96 connectors right now, and it's still growing and it's still happening. So if I see over here, I have two connected and 96 over here. So once we have connected, we have data, we have enough data coming in. We need some sort of rules, we need some sort of analytics to work with. And what we do is we create, uh, how do we, let's say Microsoft incident rule. So there's a rule. So we look at the service, and so if we have any issues with the Microsoft Defender for Office 365, we can create an alert for it and then put some specific rules as well over here. And you will get the emails around it. You have something called playbook. So what you do with this playbook is once you identified this issue, you basically create this playbook. It's like logic apps, and then do some custom actions on top of it, identifying issues with it, and then some sort of do some sort of uh, actions on it. So if you know about Logic App, it's a drag and drop system where you can drag and drop and then create some sort of workflows. So those workflows can be attached to your security incidents as well. And then coming to the workbooks, we have a lot of templates over here. So for example, if I come to this guy, Azure Defender for IoT, I would say I have a lot of templates. Let us view this template. I don't have any IoT devices connected to these stuff, so maybe not a best idea, but mm, let us try this guy. So you can see all of the data approx the time that has happened in the firewall, and then you can see different graphs over here based on these data that we have, so we can have your specifically to application rule or network or DNS and investigation and then so on and so forth. And if you come over here and go to the hunting part, what is hunting? Hunting is basically so there are few things that uh, one thing is to identify the issues and work on it, and another is to hunt for them in the first place to identify to make sure that you don't have any security loopholes. So we have a hunting mechanism as well. This is one of the very few tools who provides you this mechanism where you can hunt down a issue in the system. And what happens over here is you have a lot of queries. You can create your own queries as well. Let me run these queries and see if I have any other issues in the last few minutes. So see, for example, this guy, the view is not very good, but attempt to sign into a disabled account by IP addresses. So if you have already uh, have some sort of disabled accounts and then someone is trying to attempt to log into those accounts, that's a security incident, right? So those kind of effort will be tracked, and you can already look at those and create incidents around it and manage the workflow. Similarly, same IP addresses with multiple CS user agents, or this, let me look at this guy. Anonymous geolocation work on this is what I was talking to you about in my examples. And for example, this guy tracking password changes. If some people has changed password recently, that means it's a good thing to change password recently, but it can be a security incident as well. So you have to audit it and see that okay, people have maliciously changed password. Mm, maybe that can be the reason that someone got the access to the account and they changed the password of it. So all those kind of activities you can have. So so you can look into the 5 approach in a team chat because uh, it can be different kind of files that can be added to the teams. So you have to keep an audit of it and then uh, analyze it and work on top of it. So similarly, potential IAS code injection attempt if someone is trying to do some sort of code injection into the IAS to hijack your IAS and then get access to your website. So all those kind of security incident they have already thought of depends upon the kind of different kind of connectors that you have, and then you can hunt it down directly with just press of a button like this. So you see results are loading right now, zero result, zero result. I don't have this is my personal account. I don't have over here. So but you get the gist of it, right? So it's a good tool to identify these issues and then analyze all those security incidents that can happen. And with that, I think I'm going out of time as well. So let me come back to my PPT. We have talked about log analytics workspace. We have about you can look into the news and guides to see what's new happening around the security world and what is the updates. You can investigate on incidents, as I told you. You can do threat management with these workbooks, and then you can hunt down these issues, and uh, you can basically run this notebooks as well, which is predefined notebooks for threat management. And then you can connect it with different connectors and then run analytics on top of it, and then have some sort of logic app associated with it to do some preventive HM or do some actions against it. And then you have a good community, and of course I should show you the pricing, so you can select what kind of money that you want to spend with Azure Sentinel, you can select that whether you need 100 GB per day capacity reservation or 500 GB per or pay you can want to go into pay as you go tier. So everything the cost associated with it change accordingly, and you can basically it depends upon your user. You can have your reserved quota for it. And talking about GitHub, you can go to github.com Azure/Azure Sentinel, and you can see all those things that I've been talking about is open source, and you can also contribute to Azure Sentinel. So I'm not going to go into deep of this and tell you about this roadmap at this moment because I think we are running out of time. But I want to say about CEF correction or syslog. I was talking about CEF, which is a common format of security.
Mohit,
Yes.
Mohit, you can take time, Mohit. I didn't see Steven on the backstage.
Okay.
You can take some time. Take your time uh, if you're able to.
Okay. Then I will come back over. So maybe then I can talk about different activities. So if you see over here, we can create a map of your activities and see, okay, what is happening. Login attempt was failed, and then it was suspicious PowerShell script which was running, and then it was connecting to these different devices. So you can create whole sort of whole sort of map around different components that you have, ranging from user accounts to system accounts to the actual infrastructure that you have on Azure or on premises. So you can visualize the entire attack and its impact. So you know, like it's one of the challenge as well to identify how much damage has been done by different uh, how much damage has been done by different attacks that we had in last few hours or few months. Because sometimes what happens is people get the access to our system, and we as security professionals got to know only after some time about it. Maybe in some cases, or even after months. So we have to visualize and identify how much damage has been done, and it's very important so that you can take preventive actions against those damages as well. So you can do that with the security center, and also whenever there is I was talking about the response part of it, and then I was talking about this playbook. So you can connect this logic app in this, and then you can say that okay, whenever there is a new security incident, maybe send messages in the Teams channel, and then if the security incident, if the severity is high, send an email as well to everyone, alert, send an SMS to people, and then alert them so that they can uh, look into this issue and then block that user access whomsoever is trying to cause this security incident, whomsoever we think that their account has been compromised, so we can automatically block it. So if you see, this is a whole workflow, and we use something called Azure Logic Apps for it, and you don't have to write any piece of code for it. It's just a drag and drop tool that you can design your workflow with, and then add the specific configurations to it. So you can use your ATPs, Office 365, IAS that I was talking about as your account, but you can also use your on premises or any other SaaS or cloud apps to connect to Azure Sentinel because of the CEF. So if you see this diagram, you can have your on premises rogue, which is coming from the syslog connector, or a CEF that I was talking about, which is very important. And you can use your Linux accounts, Linux based systems as well, and then connect it with and then basically send those syslogs over TLS to the uh, to basically a server which collects all these CEF logs, and then which can now further connect to Azure Sentinel over HTTPS. So all this data flows to HTTPS and secure, so that someone in the middle cannot come inside it and then attach the or modify the information that we have doing the flow. So and you can always connect with your all Windows-based devices and stuff. Also, it's a direct connection for your F5 devices, F5 firewalls and stuff, so you can directly connect different scenarios. Uh, if you install a log analytics agent base, it basically corrects basically is Windows events and the Linux 6 logs associated to it, but it can also correct your IAS events, your local files events, or your firewall or DNS based events connected to it. So it's log analytics is nothing but your OMS. If you're working in a traditional world, you will know about OMS there. So it's the same agent that basically installs onto the machine and then gathers all the data and send it to a log analytics workspace, and Azure Sentinel sits on top of it, analyze the data, and then create some sort of logic around it or information around it. So it's basically quite simple to add it. You just go to your machine and then the you can deploy this agent to it, or you can download in the machine and then just install it in your machine as well. Mm, I think if I talk about this would not be the right thing, but you can go to mm, you can go to aka.ms if you want to learn more about Azure Sentinel, and I am now open for questions and answers if you have any. Do we have any questions in the chat, Swami? Can you see any questions in the chat, Swami? I think we have lost Swami. Let us wait for him and all. Let me check if we have any questions uh, in the chat. Let me go to the chat and try it out.
Hey Mohit.
Yes, Swami.
Hey,
We,
I think you're done, isn't it?
yes,
I don't see any queries also.
yeah,
So we'll wait, no problem.
yes, Swami.
Hey, I think you're done, isn't it?
Yes, I'm done.
I don't see any queries also.
Yeah.
So we'll wait, no problem. I tried reaching Vikin Raj, who's the next speaker, and I'm trying to reach him also. I think Stephen thought that it will be at 4 o'clock because His previous sessions was at 4 o'clock. They were always at 4 p.m. India time. So that will be 5:30 a.m. Eastern time. So I'm assuming that he is expecting that his session will be at 5:30 Eastern time. So I think we'll give him 10 minutes time.
So, for the attendees, I can request you can go ahead and grab a coffee. We can have a small coffee break. Till the time we have our next speaker lined up. Please grab a coffee, take a bio break, and then
Bio break.
come back. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. We'll wait for 10 minutes. It's 3:50. So in next 10 minutes, I think it will be 4 o'clock India time, which will be 5:30 a.m. Eastern time. I hope Steven should come by that time. Hello,
Hi,
Vicky.
Swami. Yeah,
Hey, Vicky. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining.
yeah.
Hey,
Hi,
guys.
Swami.
Let me introduce Vic Niraj.
Hi.
Uh, I, could you please share your screen?
Yes. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
I have added it to the stream,
Yeah.
and yeah. Okay, you can introduce yourself, Vicky, and it's all yours. I am jumping out of the stream.
Yeah.
Uh,
Thank
I
you,
will be
Swami.
jumping out as well.
Uh, yeah.
I will be jumping out as well. Thank you, Vignesh, for joining this session. I think it's going
Oh,
to be
thank
very
you.
useful
Yeah.
for
Thank you.
everyone. It's one of the latest topics of interconnectivity between Azure. I think it's with on-premises to Azure, if I'm not
Yeah.
wrong, right?
Yes.
So it's going to be a beautiful session. So I think all of you guys who have been waiting for the last 5-10 minutes, it was worth it. And hand it over to you, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Mohit, for your wonderful session. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. So, hi everyone. Thank you for joining this session. Today, I'm going to talk about working with Azure Intersite Connectivity. So, it is a full infrastructure related session. Okay, so before I starting my session, I'm Vignaraj from Sri Lanka. So I'm also a Microsoft MVP in Azure and a Microsoft MCT regional lead. So working as a senior system engineer at IFS R&D International, and I did some architect and security engineering certifications. Okay, so it's about myself. So if you want to need more about me, so you can visit my private website. So that is technetwiki.com. Okay, so we'll start the session. Okay, in the today's session, we are going to discuss about intersite connectivity. So in the intersite connectivity, we are discussing about VNet peering and the VPN gateway connections and express route. So finally we can do some lab session, so you can able to understand how we can configure the VNet peering and the VPN connection. So express route, I can explain about express route, but the practically we cannot do the express route lab session, because if we need to do some express route lab scenarios, so we need some ISP. So just I can explain you how to do the express route configurations. Okay, so first we'll discuss about VNet peering. Okay, so in the VNet peering, so we are going to discuss about VNet peering, gateway transit and connectivity. So finally, we'll do some VNet peering lab session. So lab session will do it later. Okay, so VNet peering. So VNet peering is the simplest and quickest way to connect our virtual network to another virtual network. So the it's mean in my presentation, we have VNet 1, VNet 2, and VNet 3. So almost 3 virtual networks. So virtual networks mean VNet. So in here we have 2 region 1 and region 2. So region 1 we have VNet 2 and VNet 3, and the region 2 have VNet 2 and VNet 3, and the region 1 have VNet 1. Okay, so in here VNet 2 and VNet 3, if we want to access the VNet 2 resources from the VNet 3, so we need to create the peering. So that is called VNet peering. So VNet peering have 2 types. So one is regional VNet peering, and the second one is global VNet peering. So the regional VNet peerings mean if we want to connect our Azure virtual network in the same region, so that is called VNet peering. For an example, if our VNet 2 is located in East US. At the same time, VNet 3 also located in the East US. So if we want to connect the East US to East US or same region, on that time we can choose or we can call regional VNet peering. And the second one is a global VNet peering. So global VNet peering means if we want to connect the different region. For an example, the region 1 is hosted in West Europe and the region 2 is hosted to East US. So if we need to connect the West Europe to East US, so that is called global VNet peering. So it is mean global peer. Global peer mean we can connect the different region. So that is called regional global VNet peering. Okay. So actually this is the very simple setup. So at the same time, we don't need any downtime or anything for creating the VNet peering. So in the VNet peering, we have some benefits. The benefits are it is private. It's private means the network traffic between the peer virtual network, it's private. So it's full and full private connection. At the same time, the high performance, high bandwidth connection between resources in the different virtual networks. So it is high performance. At the same time, it is more communication. So it is means peer. Once
I guess, sorry, looks like there is an internet blip. Wiki, yeah, he rejoined.
actually, I have some issue.
Internet, I figured it out all of a sudden.
Yes.
It went, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, could you please share your screen? I'll add it to the stream.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I think VNet peerings we have covered, and then gateway transit is pending. I think so. Okay, so in here we have two virtual network, VNet A and VNet B. The both VNets are peered. So when the VNet A and VNet B are peered, we can configure the VPN gateway in the peered virtual network. So in the peered virtual network, when we create the VPN gateway, that is called transit point. So in this case, a peered virtual network can use the remote gateway to gain access to other resources using the VPN gateway or allow VPN gateway transit. So this is the transit. If we want to access our VNet A to VNet B. So on that time, we can use VPN gateway. But for the VNet peering, so it is not required. So VPN gateway, it's not required for creating the VNet peering. Okay. So the next one is configure the VNet peering. So in here, we need to select the peer link name and the remote virtual name. So in our last part, we'll discuss and do some lab session about VNet peering. Okay. So the second one is VPN gateway connection. Okay. So actually the VPN gateway is the specific type of virtual network gateway that is used to send encrypted traffic between an Azure virtual network and an on-prem location over the public internet. So that is called VPN connection. Okay, so in the VPN connection overview, we'll discuss about VPN gateways. Implementing site-to-site VPN connection, we'll do one lab session, and we need to create the gateway subnet. So in the virtual network, we need to create the gateway subnet. And then we need to create the VPN gateway. We need to configure the VPN gateway. On that time, we can select the gateway type. At the same time, we need to create the local network connection and the VPN connection. So if we are going to configure the on-prem devices, that is called site-to-site VPN. So in here, we have some scenario. So on-prem and Azure. So we'll connect that one also. And then we need to discuss about VPN gateway and SKU and generations. And finally, we'll do the configuration. Okay, so VPN gateway. In the VPN gateway, we have three part. One is site-to-site connection. Site-to-site connection means if we want to connect our on-prem data center to Azure virtual network, so that is called site-to-site connection, site-to-site VPN connection. Or if we want to connect our VNet to VNet connection using the VPN gateway, so that is called VNet to VNet connection. And the last one is point-to-site VPN, or that is called user VPN. So it's mean the individual devices to access our virtual network. So that is called point-to-site VPN. Okay, so when you are creating the multiple connection in the same VPN gateway, so if you have one VPN gateway, so when you are creating the multiple connection to the same VPN gateway, all the VPN tunnels are shared the available gateway bandwidth. For an example, if you have four VPN connection, for an example, it is 100 Mbps or something, so it should be 25 Mbps per connection. So that is called when you are creating multiple connection in the same VPN gateway. Okay, so but you can create the multiple connection in the same VPN gateway. So that is also there. But if you are creating the multiple connection in the same VPN gateway, on that time the tunnel will share the available bandwidth. Okay, so this is some example on-prem and Azure side. So in the on-prem, they have mentioned they are using 10.101.0.0/24, and their public IP address is 128.8.8.8. And the Azure side, okay, so they are providing 131.1.1.1, the public IP, and the private IP is 10.1.0.0/16. So before we configure the private part, we need to discuss our on-prem network administrator team. So if we have the same network configuration, private network configuration on our on-prem and cloud, so we cannot access the VPN tunnel. So we should be carefully creating this private network range. Okay, so this is implementing site-to-site VPN connection. So in here we have two parts, Azure and on-prem. Okay, so Azure part and on-prem part. So first one is create the VNet and subnet. Okay, so VNet mean, okay, so VPN virtual network connection. So first we need to create the virtual network and subnet. So remember, when you are creating the virtual network connection to Azure, and the Azure virtual network, it's going to connect our on-premises location. So when you are creating the VNet, so you need to coordinate with your on-prem network administrator to reserve the public IP address range. So actually it will it's depend on the on-prem and Azure VPN. For an example, let's say the on-prem network administrators are said, hey, we are using 10.1.0.0/24 series. So you cannot create that series. On that time you can create 172.16 or something in the Azure, so you can use that one also. So actually, when you are creating the configuring the network part, you should carefully plan your network configuration. If it is duplicated IP range exists on both sides of the VPN connection, the traffic will not route the way you may expect. So you should be carefully planned on that part. So first part is VPN, VNet, virtual network, and subnet. And the second one is specify the DNS server. So that is optional. Actually, DNS is not required to create the site-to-site connection. So, however, if you want to have name resolution for resources, on that time you can deploy the DNS server. So actually, DNS part is optional in the site-to-site VPN connection. Okay. And the third one is create the subnet gateway. So subnet gateway means actually before you creating the virtual network gateway, you need to create the gateway subnet. So the gateway subnet means the gateway subnets mean it's contain the IP address that's are used by the virtual network gateway. So if you want to create the VPN gateway, so you should create the gateway subnet. So gateway subnet can use CIDR block like /27 or /28 to provide enough IP address to accommodate feature additional configuration requirement. Okay, and then we need to create the VPN gateway. So it should take at least 45 minutes to create the gateway. And the local network gateway means the on-prem configuration. So that is local network gateway. And the on-prem, if they have some VPN devices called some Cisco or FortiGate, so they will configure the settings, and then they will send us the public IP and the internal network range and pre-shared key. Okay, so this is first part, create the gateway subnet. So when you are selecting the create the gateway subnet, so when you are selecting the gateway subnet, so in here the name is gateway subnet. So you cannot change the gateway subnet name. Actually, gateway subnet name must be named gateway subnet. And the range you can choose here, it is 10.0.0.0/24. So you can use, normally we are using 27 or 28. Okay. So when you create your gateway subnet, gateway VMs are deployed to the gateway subnet and configure the required VPN gateway settings. Okay. And then, okay, so when you are creating, yes, it's okay. So we'll see the next one. Next one is VPN gateway configuration. Okay, so this is the VPN network connection configuration. Okay, in here we have two type of VPN. So one is VPN and express route. So if you want to create the site-to-site VPN connection, you can choose VPN. Or if you want to create the express route connectivity, you can choose express route. Okay. And the VPN type, we have two type of VPN, route based and policy based. So most of the connections are root based. Actually, we don't use policy based. It is legacy configuration. Nowadays, we are using only a root based. Okay, so and then SKU, we have SKU, so you can select drop down to select the SKU. So we'll discuss about SKU on the next presentation, next slide. And then generation, we have two generation 1 and generation 2. Actually changing the generation or changing the SKUs generation, it's not allowed. Basic and VPN gateways are only supported in generation 1. So if you want to select the generation 1, it is basic or VPN GW. We'll discuss what is basic and VPN GW, GW4 and GW5 in the next slide. Okay, and then we need to select our virtual network. So we can select the virtual network, and then we'll select the gateway subnet also. Okay, so this is the VPN gateway types. Okay, in here we have two types, root based and policy based. Okay, root based VPN use routes in the IP forwarding or routing table to direct packets to another location. Okay, so it is supported to IKE version 2, and at the same time we can use dynamic routing protocols like BGP. And the policy based VPN type, actually we don't use that one because it is supported only for IKE version 1, and it is legacy on-prem devices. Now if you upgrade the router OS, you cannot, it's not supported. So policy based is the old one. So most of the VPN are using root based VPN connection. Okay, and this is our gateway SKU and generation. Okay, so in the generation we have gen 1 and generation 2. So SKU, so it is mean normally in the VPN gateway we can create maximum 30 VPN tunnels or VNet tunnels, but we can create more point to site VPN connection. So for an example, if you need 500 users, so you can select VPN GW2 generation 1 or generation 2, and the generation 1 and generation 2 are depend on the speed. This is a throughput. So if you want to create the throughput like 1.2 Gbps, and you can choose G3 or W3 or W2, and then you need to select the connection. For you are creating only the site to site VPN connection, so you can choose the generation 1 also. Okay, and the next one is local network gateway. So local network gateway typically is on-prem location. So this is for our site name. So name means site name. So we can give the site name by which site we are using. For an example, so we are using our site name India. So on that time, the name is India. And then endpoint mean we need to add the Indian router public IP address. So this is customer's public IP address. If they have dynamic name or DNS name, so we can choose FQDN. In the endpoint, we have two options. If the customer provide the IP address, so we can choose IP address. Or if the customer provide the DNS name or FQDN name, we can choose FQDN. Okay, so that is IP address. And the second one is address space. Actually, we must create both things. So actually this is necessary. And the address space, if you do not add the address space, so you cannot access the on-prem environment. Okay, so address space, you can add one or more IP address ranges. So it's define your local network address space. So if you want to enable the BGP settings, so it is dynamically. For an example, in the India region, so you have one public IP address, so that is 33.2.1.5. and you have 4 locations. So one is 192.168.3, 192.168.2 or something. And if you have another 5 region like 172.16, 172.18 or something, on that time we need to add the additional address range. So if we choose the BGP setting, so it is dynamic, so it is automatically updated to the table. So we have 2 options, static options or dynamic option. When you are selecting the BGP setting, so it is dynamic, so you don't want to add additional IP ranges, network ranges here. Okay, so and then on-prem devices, if we want to configure the on-prem devices, actually we need to first we need to check the document, the Microsoft Azure document. So this is the document. So when you are creating the on-prem devices, so you should read this article. So this is validate VPN devices and device configuration guide. For an example, if you are using the Cisco Meraki, the OS version should be MX version 15. So if they have lower version, so it is not supported. So the connection is not be established, so you cannot access the environment. At the same time, if you are using the 40net devices, the 40 OS should be minimum 5.6. So actually these are the basic requirements. So before you configure the on-prem devices, you need to read this one. So you can you can search VPN devices and IPsec parameters. So this is the validate VPN devices. Okay, at the same time, just you can read some ideas. Here I can choose the Meraki configuration guide. Okay, so this is our part. And the Meraki part, this is the configure the Meraki VPN configuration. Here they can choose the name and then IKE version 2. It is the Azure VPN and our public IP. So and the private subnet range. Okay, so if they configure this one, the connection will be automatically up. Okay, fine. Okay, and this is the local network gateway. Local network gateway, when we are creating the local network gateway and the VPN gateway, we need to create the connection. Okay, so this is the last part for VPN configuration. So the connection name means Azure to on-prem. Okay, and the connection type site to site or VNet to VNet or express route. Okay, so this is site to site. We are configuring the site to site IPsec VPN, and then we need to select the VPN gateway. Here it is already selected, and the local network gateway, we need to select our local network gateway. It's mean our customer information, and then pre-shared key. Okay, so pre-shared key, so you can create the password using pass generator website, or normally in the VPN connection we don't use these password. When you want to create the password, you can go to this website, password generator. Yes, this is the site for generating the password. So in here you can choose 20 characters and you can choose the number. Okay, right, and then you can generate the password. So we'll select 20. So this is the password. Actually complex password. Normally if you want to create the VPN connection, you should select the complex password. Okay, fine. And then we can create the connection. After creating the connection, you need to send this pre-shared key to your customer, or if the customer provide the pre-shared key, so when you are creating the connection, you need to enter the pre-shared key. If the pre-shared key is mismatched, so connection will not establish. Okay, and the last one is express route. Okay, so in the express route overview, we'll discuss about express route capabilities, coexisting site to site and express route, and inter-site communication. Okay, so the express route. Okay, the express route is depend on the internet service provider. Actually, the express route is more faster, reliable, and private connection. The express route, we can create private connection between Azure data center and our on-prem connection. So compared to VPN, we can connect Azure data center to on-prem data center through the public network. The express route means we can create the private channel to on-prem to Azure. So in the express route, we have two connection, primary and secondary connection. When the primary is down, secondary connection will automatically activate. Okay, so express route connection, you can connect anywhere. So for an example, if you are located in India, so there are several service providers, so you can choose the service provider, and you need to send the service key to the provider. When the provider is added the service key, on that time your connection will authorize. Okay, so bandwidth option is 50 to 100 Gbps supported, and the global connectivity with express route on-prem. Okay, and the express route, actually the benefit of express route connection, that is layer 3 connectivity. So you can choose BGP. Okay, and coexisting site-to-site and express route mean, actually if you need the fault tolerance connection or multi-channel connection, you can create the VPN connection and express route connection. But express route connection is more expensive compared to VPN, because express route connection, we need to depend on the service provider. Okay, and site-to-site VPN, then Azure VPN, we don't depend any service provider, so it is directly connected to our on-prem to Azure cloud through the public network. Okay, so this is inter-site connection comparison. Okay, so we have three type of connection: point to site, site to site, and express route. The point to site, it's mean the active passive mode, and the site to site VPN, we have two: active or active passive. And the express route mean active. It's mean once the primary connection is down, the secondary connection will automatically up. Okay, now let's move to the lab session. Okay. Okay, so okay. Okay, in here I have two resource groups. So one is HQ and other one is IFS. Okay, so we are going to create the connection between HQ to IFS. So this is the VPN gateway. So here you can see this is the VPN GW2, and the gateway type is VPN, and the VPN type is root based, and this is our public IP. Okay, so for an example, IFS need to connect HQ. Okay, so I will take one notepad and we'll create one VPN connection between IFS to HQ. Okay, so here it is. Okay, fine. Right, so this is HQ. HQ mean our headquarters, and the second one is IFS. Okay, so HQ, they will provide the public IP address. Public IP address mean their gateway address. Okay, so this is the HQ gateway public IP. So I just copy this public IP and paste it here. So this is IP address. Okay, so this is HQ public IP, and we need the private range. So private range means the virtual network address. Okay, so I will select the virtual network address. Okay, so this is the virtual network address space 172.16. So just copy and paste it to this document. Okay, so this is the headquarters information. Okay, so headquarters information, so they are provide their public IP address and the private IP address, and then IFS we need to send our public IP and the private details. Okay, so okay, so our public IP. Okay, so this is our public IP. So yes, this is our one, and our private network. So this is our private one. All right, so okay, so this is our private range. Okay, so now we are going to create the local network gateway. We have already created one virtual network gateway, so I'm going to add one local network gateway. So just type local network gateway. Okay, okay, so create this local network gateway. So IFS, they need to configure the headquarters details. Okay, so this is the headquarters public IP address. Okay, so this is HQ local network gateway, and the address space, their private IP 172. This is the private range. Okay, so we don't choose this one. Okay, so our location is West Europe. We'll create it. Okay, at the same time, HQ, they need to add IFS information. So here also we need to create one local network gateway. Okay, so create. In here we need to add IFS information. So this is IFS network gateway and the private IP. My location is East US. Okay, create. Okay, so deploying in process. Okay, it is completed. So go to resource. Okay, so this is HQ local network gateway. So here we can find the connection. At the moment, we don't have any connection. Okay, this is also configured. Okay, right. This is the IFS local network gateway. So connection, we don't have any connection. Okay, so I'm going to create one connection. So I'm in the IFS location, and this is HQ location. Sorry, I need to select the resource group. Okay, so this is IFS resource group. and I need to select second one. Okay, so this is HQ resource group. Okay. So we can select this connection. Okay, so I'm going to create one connection. So this connection HQ to IFS. Okay, and then that is site-to-site VPN. And I need to select IFS gateway. So it is not added now, still it's pending. I will refresh this. I made one mistake. The resource group is different. Okay. Delete. Yes. First, we'll create it from here. Okay, so first I am going to create the connection. So add the connection. So it is IFS to HQ. So it is site-to-site VPN. So I need to select this IFS gateway, and then shared key. Just I am choosing ASB 1 2 3 4 5 6. Okay, and okay. So the now connection is creating. Okay, so in the HQ resource group, I need to create one local network gateway. Okay, local network gateway. IFS information network gateway. So IFS information. Another resource group. Okay, HQ. Okay, fine, right. Okay, so this IFS to HQ is created, but status is unknown. We'll go for the properties. The provision status is success, but the status is unknown. Okay, right. Okay, in here, I'm going to create the connection. So connection name is HQ to IFS. So HQ VPN, and then shared key is same key. So I will copy and paste it here. Okay, so I'm creating the connection. Okay, so now I'm going to log in that VMs. So it is easy to communicate. Okay, so this is the public IP. I will copy this IP. Okay, so this is HQ. We'll choose HQ, and then I will paste this IP. Okay, and second one IFS. IFS. Okay, same. Choose this IFS. Okay, so we'll start both VMs. So I'm going to switch off the firewall. for now. But when you want to ping the VMs to VMs, you need to create the firewall rules, and then you need to enable the ICMP version 4 echo. So for this testing, I'm going to turn off this firewall for just for the testing. Okay, so I'm going to ping the VM HQ to IFS VM. Okay, right. Okay, so we'll check this connection status. It is connected. Okay, yeah, it's connected. Let's refresh this. Okay, unknown properties. It is successed. Okay, so at the moment, data in and data out is 0. In here also data in and out is 0, but the status is connected. Okay, so this is IFS VM. Okay, so we'll ping 10.1.0.4 from HQ. I'm in the HQ. I'm going to ping this VM. It is replying from IFS to HQ. Ping. I'm going to ping the private IP address, not the public IP. Okay, 172.16. Okay, it is replying. Right. Okay. Okay, 172.16.0.4. Okay, so I can ping HQ VM to IFS VM using the private IP address. It's mean the VPN tunnel is established. Okay, in here we can find the data in and data out. So if it is 0 KB and 0 KB, you can simply do the ping. So when it is ping, so it should be data in and data out. For compared to on-prem devices, Azure, it should take few minutes to up the connectivity. Okay, so now the connection is established. Okay, I hope you can understand the intersite connectivity and VPN connection. Okay, thank you for joining my session. Okay, Swami, I think I can close my session.
Hey, Vikram Raj, it was a pretty good session. I've learned many things in that, seriously. Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Steven?
Hey everybody. Good afternoon.
Hey, welcome. Yeah, it is 4:50, so it is like evening technically.
Yeah.
So welcome, Steven. Do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, let's get going. All right. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, everybody, I should say. It's 6:30 a.m. here, And we are going to talk about messaging and eventing in Azure. Okay. This is what we're going to go through today. We're going to go through really what your messaging and eventing options are. We're going to do a whole bunch of demos, and we might get to what you still need to think about, even though there's a lot of tools. And so when we get done, what I'm trying to do is basically in Azure, there's all sorts of different things you can do with messaging and the way that things communicate and the way that you put together overall architectures. And there's a lot of questions around that, right? Do I use Event Grid, or do I use a storage queue, or do I use Event Hubs or Azure Service Bus? Really, and what's the difference between all of these things, and when would I use them in my particular architecture? So, because there's so many different options, and there's even more options than this actually in terms of eventing. So, for example, I could have Cosmos DB, and if you put a document in Cosmos DB, you can have Cosmos DB tell something that, hey, there's a new document, and then you could do work from that. I'm not going to go into that type of thing. I'm going to focus in on these 4 different technologies and really talk about one, what are their use cases and when would I use them? Basically, actually, that's the main thing I want to do. I want you to know when you do an architecture in Azure, which one of these I need to pick and why. Okay, and I was in a couple architecture discussions, and they were using event hubs for all sorts of crazy things. And I said, guys, you're doing business processing. You should be using Service Bus. So those will be the types of things hopefully you get out of this in terms of picking which one you want to do. And this is generally the amount of time we're going to spend on each one of these things. So the first one is storage queues. And I only bring this up because it's been there forever, basically. It's super simple. It's basically, it's as simple as a queue as you could get. And you could build things off of it for sure. But I probably wouldn't, to be honest. And I'm only bringing it up from the standpoint of completeness. It's very, very, very cheap because it has almost no functionality. You can keep 80 gigabytes of data in this particular queue, and it has a time to live, so I can set that on there, and that's really about it. And I'll just show you what that looks like real quick. I have basically the way you would do it, the way you would add it is you would add a storage account. So I have these storage accounts in Azure. This is Azure Data Explorer, and I have a couple different storage accounts. I have this one here that I created. This is a standard storage account. I didn't do anything special with it. And in here, you can see that it has these queues. I don't have any queues right now, but I can go ahead and create a queue. And you can do this all from REST too, so it's super simple. If I create a simple queue, it creates it nearly automatically because there's not much really going on. And then I can add a message to it. So I can say, and I can submit this message, and now I have a message in the queue. And you can build a client that then can pull off this particular message and do work from it. The other thing I can do with this message is I can set a time to live, so I can actually have it expire. So maybe I have that, and that's it. Really, it's pretty simple. And actually, I don't think I have any architectures where I would choose to use this particular mechanism, but it is one of those things out there, and someone might bring it up, so I want you to know about it and how simple it is. And the reason I wouldn't use it is because almost all of my architectures are more complex than just adding a simple thing to a queue. This is really the main pattern you would do. So every one of these slides shows the patterns that you would use on the right-hand side. So this is really this send and receive pattern, and that's it. So that's it for storage queues. I don't think there's much to talk about it, and we can stop and ask questions when we get into more interesting topics. But storage queues is one mechanism that's available. It's pretty old, so we won't get into that. Has anybody used the event grid? And I got to figure out how to see the chat. I think if I pull this over here, I can see it, right? I pull this over to my other screen, I can see it when someone asks me a question.
Steve, I'm collecting all the queries, Steve.
Yeah, and you can stop me if you have questions.
Once I see a question getting popped up, I'll ping you. I'll go on mute.
Yep. So the next thing is Event Grid. I don't know if anyone's used Event Grid. If you had, just let me know. I'm just curious about the audience and what we have here. But Event Grid is it's kind of cool. It's really the part of the fabric of Azure, and you can see all of these resources here have event queues that you can use. Okay, they respond to resource events, and what I mean by that is I can have Event Grid. You can have an event grid tied to a resource group. Well, what do I get off of a resource group? And the answer is, well, if something's added or removed or changed to a resource group, then I would know about it. And blob storage would be, again, if something was added or removed to blob storage. This there's actually more than this. This isn't even a complete list. The list is actually much longer because the demo I'm going to show you is with Azure App Configuration. And when I update or delete, I add or update or delete a configuration setting, it sends an event, which is cool. So I think you could do some things with event-driven architecture, and that's the idea that events really drive the business process. And the reason I think that is because, so let's say I had something getting stored to blob storage, and that was my business process, was to save a file. And once it saves a file, it sends this thing on the grid. I could have a business process then trigger off of that and then do some more work from that. So I think that it could be part of an event-driven architecture, but for me, event-driven architecture is always going to be tied to Azure Service Bus, which we're going to get to in a bit. But the one thing about this is it isn't something that you would use to publish events to, right? Everything comes from Azure. So if you were going to build a pub sub model, you couldn't use Event Grid. It's not what it's for. It doesn't do that. It's really for DevOps or creating disaster recovery, things. So let's say I had this. Let's say I wanted to. Most things in Azure do go from region to region, but one thing that might not go from region to region is your configuration stuff. And when I change that, I might have a background process that's listening for that event and then copies those over to the other region for me. So if I have a situation like that, I might use Event Grid in order to know that. And then I think DevOps, there's a lot of things in terms of DevOps that could use an Event Grid, because fundamentally we're changing resources and acting on resources in Azure, and we want to do some changes with that. And it integrates with a lot of different things. Actually, I haven't used Microsoft Flow, but that's obviously the Microsoft Power Platform. Is that the Power Platform one? I'm not sure, actually. But the rest of them, you can do a lot of different things with it. And the one that I'm going to show you is the webhook. So when an event comes in, what it does is it calls an HTTP endpoint that you have. So I have a website that I want I think people can go to this website, and I have it. It's here. So I'm gonna put this into the. Can I put this in the chat for people? So if you could just go here, let me see. Let me give it to you, and then maybe you could give it out. But anyway, if you could go to learnergrid.azurewebsites.net. This is I think I put the link in here. This is what we're going to go through. This the architecture that we have that I'm going to show you, and this is the link, and I'll give Swami the PowerPoint so that you guys have the links too. And so this is an application. What the application does is it provides a webhook for the event grid. So what I'm going to do is, I'm the user. I'm going to change my app configuration. It's going to publish an event to the event grid, which is going to execute this webhook into this app service. Okay, and then the URL I gave you will be up in your client browser. So if you pull it up, you should see something like this. And I have one here in my what application is that? That's that's Firefox. And then I have another one. I don't want to use this one. I could use this one, I guess. So I have Firefox, and then I have Chrome. Let me just use this one here. So I have two of them, so that you can just see the kind of the way that works. we'll see it in both of these guys here. So let me just put them side by side. Let me show you how I hooked it up, okay? So in Azure, what ends up happening is that, let me bring over this one, maybe this one here. So in Azure, we have a lot of, like I said, this is something that I think is going to be in every single resource imaginable. So I have a resource group. I have my app configuration here. App configuration is just like it sounds. It's going to hold configuration values for my application because I don't want to have them in my application. And they all have this thing called events right here. So if I go to blob storage, I'll see this. If I go to resource groups, I'll see it. If I go to, all of the different things, I will see this events here. And so what you can do is you can say add event, and I've already added this event, so I'm not going to add it again. And you can name the event, and you can pick the schema, and we're going to see what this looks like. There's just a little bit of variation between these two, and I don't really have a preference in any of them, to be honest with you. But so I'm just going to pick the default. And then what happens is that they let you pick the events that you want to know. So here you can see, hold on a second. Oh yeah. So here you can see I only have two choices, key value modified or key value deleted. So those are the events that I'm going to get when I make this particular change. And then they have an endpoint type, and you can, so here's where you can see the different endpoint types. And I had it in my diagram, and now I have it here in Azure. And we are going to use the webhook type, okay? But you can see, if I had an Azure function or service bus topic or service bus queue, then any of these would be an option for you. So that's pretty cool. So now I have this really tight integration, and I don't really have to do anything to make it work, pretty much. And what I did was, and I won't do it today, but I selected webhook. And then down here, I selected an endpoint. And then I put in my endpoint, and my endpoint is this one here. So, so this is my endpoint here. Hold on a second. Right. Come on. Right here. So this is my endpoint, right? This is the one everybody navigated to. So I have an endpoint, and that endpoint has a controller, and it takes a post request, basically. So when I do this, back to my diagram, when I do this is going to do a post to my app service, and my app service has SignalR, and the SignalR is going to broadcast that event down to my browser, right? So if you have it open, you should see this particular event come in. So I will go back here and try it. So we'll go ahead and put this to the side. And now we can see our screens here. So there's my event grouper. Hopefully everybody pulled that up so that you can see it working. So I'll go into here, and I'll go into my configuration explorer here. And I have one configuration setting. It says happy with presentation. And so we'll go ahead and change this configuration setting. And right now it says yes, which hopefully is okay with everybody so far. And we'll say, not sure yet. So I'll change my configuration value, right? So I'm changing the value. I have an event. I have an event grid hooked up to this particular event. It's supposed to grab this change and broadcast it to my webhook in my app service, which is located at learnergrid.azure.websites.net. And then my SignalR should tell my browser that, hey, I got a new thing. Let's see what it looks like. So let's see what happens and see if I didn't break anything. And there it is, right? So it's there and it's there, right? Cool, right? You can download this app, actually. It's on, if you type in Azure Event Grid Viewer, and I think I have it in the slides too. But you can see what it looks like. And now we can take a look at that schema that we were talking about. And it has pretty much everything you need in order to do work on it, right? This topic is a specific, that's a very specific resource that you can take actions on. It tells me what key changed. It's given me an E tag in order, if I needed an E tag to do the change, it told me when it happened. And I can start to respond to events like this. with Event Grid. And so again, just to summarize what Event Grid is part of the Azure Fabric. It lets you get events when resources change. It's in just about all the resources, and they're adding it. If it's not there, it's going to be added eventually to the resources so that you can take actions on them. You can use it to build event-driven architecture. And there's a million, there's a couple, basically all the basic event handlers are available to you. If you don't have an event handler, you can do a webhook like I did. But it has deep integrations into things like Azure Functions and some of the out-of-the-box things. So that's Event Grid, and I think it's important to know that, because if someone says that they're going to try to do like an integration pattern like PubSub with Event Grid, the answer is no, you're not. It's not what it's for. So I want to pause for a second, because Event Grid's kind of a cool thing, and I just want to make sure everybody's cool with Event Grid.
I saw that event coming to the browser. I have opened it.
Yep.
And I'm seeing one is resource action success, and another is key value modified. I got it on it flashed it on my screen.
Nice. So it works. The system works. And it's funny because you're 6,000 miles away from me. I wonder if it showed up on my screen before yours, but that's awesome, right?
I was able to see that. It's good.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on Event Grid before I move forward? All right, we'll move forward then.
No queries till now.
Okay. So the next one I want to talk about is Event Hub. And this is where I think there's maybe a little bit of confusion on Event Hub versus Azure Service Bus. But Event Hub is when you need to do millions of transactions per hour or per second. I mean, if you had to really suck in a boatload of data, this is what you would use. So for example, if I had telemetry in automobiles and I needed to collect this telemetry, this is what I would use, because it's it's a global wide service. You can partition it for performance, and you can just gobble up tons and tons and tons of data. Some of the use cases you would use it for would be anomaly detection, and the example I'm going to show you is just that, and it's going to look at phone data, and it's going to look for things that are like repeat calls, so that it can say, hey, these look like they're fraudulent. You can do click streams. So say you had a website and you were collecting where people are clicking, and that's a boatload of data, right? If you had a big site, that would be a lot of data coming in, and you could collect all that. You could do archiving of data too, or logging, for example. So if I had a zillion million logs and I just streamed them into the Event Hubs, there's a way to process it. And actually, there's a way for Event Hubs to connect directly to blob storage and automatically save things to a data lake, which is where you need your data. If you're going to do something like a Databricks or Azure Synapse or something like that, they'll use that Databrick, and they'll query over the entire mess of it. But getting that data into the data lake is kind of part of the battle in terms of ingestion. You can have multiple consumers, and they can look over that list, and they don't know that each other really exists. The one thing I do want to point out about it is I don't know if people have used Kafka before, but Kafka is the same kind of thing where you have to manage your own pointer. So it isn't good for business event processing, because business event processing, the broker would manage the pointer, where it gives you the message, and when the message is processed, it pulls it off of the queue and you're done with it. In this case, you need to know where you are in terms of communicating with this Event Hub and which messages you've processed. And if you make a mistake and you lose your place, you could start over again if that's the way you built your system. But it is different than kind of like the queue mechanism where you're popping off messages. These really stay there in place, and you can go over them multiple times if you want to. It's really good for time series analysis too. So if you were looking at, did I get this payment come in twice within 5 minutes, something like that. So that's another type of thing that it's good for. So I have put the link for basically the walkthrough that I'm going to do here, and then show you how this kind of can be put together. So if you want to do this, you can just follow this link, and I'll give the deck to Swami, and he can provide the links. So what happens in this particular demo is, there's going to be an event publisher that is really going to stream a bunch of events over to the Event Hub. The Event Hub will collect all of the data, and then I've hooked up Stream Analytics job to the Event Hub. And what that job does is it does a query, and it joins it. Imagine Event Hub is a table of data. That's a good way to look at it, really. It's a table of data, and this query joins back on itself in order to determine, hey, have I seen this phone number before, right? So if you had a table with a list of phone numbers and a list of area codes, you could join on itself and determine if there were more than one in that list. And so we're going to do a query, and anytime that happens, we're going to sum it up and then add it to a JSON file in Azure Data Lake. You could also, this particular one does it to Power BI, but I didn't have time to do it. That's what I'm going to do later, is connect it to Power BI. This particular use case, though, is probably the most, I think it's the most useful or common use case, and that's why I picked it to show it. So first, I'm going to start my, what I want to do is start the, I'm going to start the app that's going to do the work that we need to do. And so this particular walkthrough has this generator, okay? This walkthrough has this application in a zip file, basically. So you just download it and you use it. And these parameters down here, they basically mean I want you to send 1,000 messages per hour, and I want 0.2 of them, right, 20% of these messages to be fraudulent, and I want you to do it for 2 hours. So that's what that means. So when I run this thing, now we're generating messages that are going into my Event Hub, basically. So that's what that is. It looks a little bit like the Matrix, I guess. And so now let's take a look at what it looks like on Azure. And I need to pull this back. I really just, okay, here we go. All right. So what I did in order to do this is I created a Stream Analytics job. And that job, I'm sorry, let me go back, actually. Let me start from the beginning. I have an Event Hub, and let's see here. Where is my Event Hub? Do I have 2 pages of? No, I have all 10. Here we go. Here's my Event Hub. So I created an Event Hub, and then I created. Let's see, here's my Event Hubs. So this is your namespace, and there's my Event Hub. So here's my Event Hub, the .NET Learner Event Hub. We can go into this thing, and we can see that the messages should start flowing into this particular system. I don't know if it's behind or something, but in any event, right, you just come in here and create this, and that walkthrough will take you through there. And now this is going to start collecting all of the data that that we're pushing into it. And then I went in and created a Stream Analytics job. And this is where I think things get really fun. And this job, then I'm going to go ahead and start it because it takes a couple seconds to start. This job then has the input. So I selected this. I selected my phone stream input. Actually, I hit Add Stream. And you can see here I have this Event Hub. So I selected Event Hub. And then I filled this out. And I selected my, you can see it's already selecting it because it's the only one in the resource group, actually. So I went ahead and selected my stream, I'm sorry, my Event Hub, and now it's going to be processed by this particular job. And then what I did was you can have the query. And so this query here does this join. You see how it's joining on the phone stream, again, by the timestamp. So it's joining on itself, and it's basically saying, it's doing a count of the number of times where these switches don't match each other, but the phone numbers do match each other. So then it's doing this count of star here. So it says, hey, if I have 2 of these where the phone numbers are the same, but the streams are not the same, then that's a problem for me. It's really cool too, because it actually shows you some of these results too. So you can actually start to play with these results as they're coming in. So this is what my console application is generating, and I can start to like work with it. And I think for me, this was a big moment for me to see this, because I've been doing this for a while now, and I'm used to tabular data, and I'm used to working in SQL Server, and then I got used to document databases, so I'm good with that now. But the idea that I have a stream coming in and that's my data source is kind of a weird, like, blows your mind kind of a concept. But it now makes sense, because I just have a query that queries across the stream, which is pretty awesome, I think. And you could build a client to pull that stream in and do work with that particular stream. But in this case, I'm using tooling to get the job done. And here you can see there's my input, there's my output. And what does my output do? So let's take a look at what I did for the output. Is that this output is going to save it to blob storage. Okay, that's all it is. This literally, I actually cannot add a new one, so maybe we can take a look at this one. So all this does is point to my blob storage. All right. So what happens then is that this job is running, and the job runs on a regular basis, and it's doing this particular query, and it's basically putting the results of this particular query into the blob storage. That's what it does. And so you can think, hey, if I had a stream of data and I wanted to, pull out any sorts of results, I could put it into a stream of data. I could show it on BI or wherever. But that's kind of the concept for using as an event hub with stream analytics. So let's take a look at our blob storage and make sure it's actually working. So it should be running, and it should be adding data into it. And so I have two storage accounts, and this is my data lake storage account. And there's just a checkbox in order to make one a data lake. This is a regular one that had the storage queue. This one also has a storage queue, but I checked the box to make it a data lake. And when you do that, the data lake is a hierarchical in nature. So, so that the big data stuff can query over it a little bit easier. So I have this container in here called phone calls, and I have this one file here, and you can see that it's 12 KB. But this is running now, so we should see it actually get a little bit bigger. If I refresh the page, that should theoretically get over. It was 12.41, and now it's 13.5. So you can see that the streaming analytics is now reading off of my event hub, and it's doing the queries against a series of data, and it's putting the results. And we can actually take a look at it, I think. So let me go ahead and download it and then open it up. And it opened up over here, of course. So this is the output, right? That query, remember we were doing the count? So here I have the date when it ran and the number of fraudulent calls, 2. So I can look at this and make a business decision based on that. So that is, that for me is the, I guess the quickest summary you can do on Event Hub. But the goal is to kind of get the concept of Event Hub, and I know I'm not going too deep into Event Hubs, but I wanted to make sure that you kind of have an idea of, hey, I publish a bunch of things into it. I can then do queries against it. I can iterate over each individual thing if I want to. I can use something like streaming analytics to do processing against it. Any questions about Event Hub before I move on to Azure Service Bus? And while you think of questions, I need to stop this because it actually can get kind of expensive. So I'm going to get in there and turn it off.
No queries till now, Steve. You can carry on.
Well, I hopefully it's clear. I don't want to be I don't want to waste people's time. So let me go into the streaming analytics job and stop it. Okay. Yeah, let's stop that. And I need to, I'm not running that here. It is running here. All right, good. So we've stopped that and we're no longer pumping data into Azure. That's good. Okay, Azure Service Bus. This is not the right, it's not the right one. That's okay. I have another diagram. So Azure Service Bus is going to be your broker style messaging. So RabbitMQ would be synonymous with Azure Service Bus. They have basically the same features as far as I can tell. Azure Service Bus has a lot of different ones. I'm not so sure about them, to be honest with you. Like it can do sessions and deduplication. I don't know about those things. I don't really trust it, but you know, you can try it. If I had done it, if I had seen it in production working at a high scale, I would trust it. But that takes a long time to have that kind of production experience with it. But you want to use this for your business transactions. You want to use it to. The other thing is this. So the difference between this and Event Hub is Event Hub, the client had to manage it. This, the broker manages the pointer. And what I mean by that is the broker is going to give you the next message or give you the next set of messages. And the client doesn't have to worry about that. The client just has to get the messages and use them. Some of the use cases that you can do with it is this event-driven architecture. And again, for me, event-driven architecture is a business process that works because systems do things, and when they're done, they say, "Hey, I'm done with this," and then somebody else, some other system says, "Hey, I need to do something now," and then so on and so forth. And so you have all of these systems basically working off of events and taking actions on the data they already have. You can do all the integration patterns of that your heart desires. You can do, and we'll go into some of them, and I could talk about integration patterns forever. And competing consumers. So one of the things that you may find that you need to do is you need to scale horizontally, and you need to get more than one thing doing work. Well, this is perfect for that because it's out of the box in terms of how you do that, and that's why the broker is so nice, because I can stand up multiple consumers and it automatically balances across those particular consumers, and you don't have to worry about it. It does have a lot of features actually, and I'm not sure how many of them you need in your particular thing. It will do ordering if you tie sessions in and deduplication. You know what? I think use these at your own risk, and if you do use them, or if you have used them, let me know, because I'd be curious if they worked or not. They have the idea of poison message and poison message queues. So if something happens too many times, you can move it into a queue and just kind of segregate it out, and that comes out of the box actually. And the time to live, so I can tell the broker, hey, in 10 minutes, this message needs to go away, or it needs to go into another queue, which is a nice way to do it too. So those are all good features of it. Some of the patterns you can do is, of course, pub sub, send receive. Sagas or process managers. I'm going to show you a process manager actually, because for me, that's the holy grail of all messaging patterns. And claim check, which is, so a lot of people, I get in these meetings with people and they say, hey, how big can my message be in the queue? And I said, why do you care? And they're like, well, because I want to send a gigabyte thing. I'm like, you don't want to send a gigabyte thing in a message queue. That's not what it's for. So people who want to send big things, I always think you're probably making a mistake. If you have to ask me how big a message I can put in the queue, you're making a mistake. The answer is you shouldn't ask. It should be small and lightweight, and that's how you'll get your best bang for your buck. So what do I do though? I have to get this big chunk of data somewhere else. Well, the answer is put it in blob storage and send a pointer to the blob storage, or put it somewhere else and send a pointer to that, and have the other person get it from that location that's built for storing big things. So there are other integration patterns. I actually love this site, so I'm going to bring it up. Let's see which browser it comes up in. Oh, there it goes. Cool. So I brought it up in the front page. This is so old. I mean, look at how antiquated this looks, but I love it. These are all the messaging patterns, and I have actually used quite a bit of these. So I don't know. I never really talk about my background here, but I work for the 4th largest insurance company in the world, Geico, and I built their billing system, and their billing system had every single problem in the world. Like they had times when I had to order messages. So there's this ordering thing in here somewhere, and they had this pipes and filters we did one time, and an aggregator where I had to collect a bunch of data, smush it together, and then send it somewhere else. So these are all the possible patterns you can use, and if you just scan through them and just kind of know that this is available. When you run into a problem, you can just kind of look at this and say, hey, I had this particular problem. The that one pattern, I think it's here. The other place I like to go to get patterns, and I'll just bring this up, is Azure design patterns. So this is a good one to read through. It's free, and actually they keep adding to it. Oh, that's not it. I don't know why Bing did that to me. Here we go. Cloud patterns. No, that's not it. This is it. So this is a good place to go for different. This is a good place to go to learn about Azure and different patterns. And so, if you come down here, they show, all of these different types of patterns that you can follow, and they're all pretty useful, to be honest with you. So that's where the claim check pattern came from. It didn't come from there, but they documented it, and it's a good place to read about that stuff. So let's do a demo. This is my demo here, and this is kind of the overall flow of things here, and these are the components I'm using. So I'm just using Azure Service Bus, and I'm using Cosmos DB in order to implement this. But I have 4 processes denoted here that use just these 2 services, and this is the flow that they do. And I know what you're saying. You're saying, hey, Steve, I could use durable functions. I would agree with that. I could use the durable functions framework, and I would agree with that too. You could also use something like N service bus or mass transit, and that's perfectly fine with me as well. So I wrote this, 2 years ago, I think, and I used, it was in .NET Core 3.0, and I wanted to see what it would look like if I wrote it from scratch. And the reason is because, you know what, Microsoft screws you over sometimes, to be honest with you. Sometimes they I had a whole thing in Silverlight, and then they killed it. Really, they didn't kill it, but Google killed it. And then I was like, what? So if I go closer to the metal, and the only 2 components I have are these 2, well, then I'm feeling pretty safe about what I'm building, and I know that I can move it into Amazon or wherever I need to move it. So the core of it is the pattern anyway. And the way that this works is that I have this thing that I use to start this flow, and then it just uses a normal controller. But that normal controller posts a message into Azure Service Bus, right? Actually, I think it posted into Azure Service Bus, and the process manager is now responsible for organizing orchestrating the business flow between systems 1, 2, and 3. So what this project does from a business standpoint is actually what I've been doing for the past 3 years is doing this conversion process at this company, Geico. And Geico has, insurance companies have 3 main systems. They have, this would be claims, policy, and billing. Okay, those are the 3 big systems that make up every insurance company. And what my system does is it's supposed to say, hey, I need you to convert your data, and I need you to convert your data, and I need you to convert your data. And when everybody's done converting their data, I will say that this data has converted completely, and I'll be down this green path. If it doesn't work, I need you to roll back. So the idea that you have this distributed transaction, you can't do distributed transactions basically. So you have to manage it with these compensation mechanisms. So if, for example, I get to system 3 and system 3 fails, it'll tell the process manager, hey, I failed. And then systems 2 and system 1 will roll back their transactions. But they're not really transactions. They'll roll back that work. They'll compensate and say, hey, I need you to undo that type of thing. And then it'll end up in this green state where it's still a finish, but it's a failure finish. But ultimately, this is the workflow that the system that I wrote will do. And it's nice because these systems only have to worry about the work that they need to do. I've centralized the logic for this entire application in a process manager. The process manager pattern is also called a saga. Some people call it that, but most people call it a process manager. And that's basically how it works. And everything basically goes in and out of Azure Service Bus and over into Cosmos DB. So let's look at what the infrastructure looks like in Azure. And it's not really that interesting, to be honest. But what I have here is, Actually, I have a different work group because I have this whole thing in an ARM template. So I literally stood this up last night, and I just had to change my connection strings because I haven't gotten far enough to make that a usable thing yet. But what I have here is I have an Azure Service Bus, and the Service Bus then has there's two kinds, and I'm not going to get into queues. This queues is a more sophisticated version of the queues we saw at the beginning of the presentation. But what I have here are topics. And so here are all the topics that I have. And all of them only have one subscriber right now because I only have one application that I need in order to do work on it. But not this one here, not this rollback. Remember I said if this third one fails, everybody has to undo their process. Well, that's how I'm achieving that. That process manager says, hey, it failed. And then boom, all three systems get the same failure message and all three systems undo their process. So that's why that one has 3. But otherwise, these are the business events that can happen. And I just want to point something out to people. When I think about eventing, I think in terms of, there's only 2 types of messages, okay? You can say, I guess there's people who think messages are generic and I'm just sending something from somewhere to somewhere else. Fine. But from a business perspective, and if you're building an event-driven system, there's only 2 kinds of messages. There's commands, and that's, hey, you do something. And there's events, and that's, hey, I did something. So in an event-driven architecture, everything is a past tense event, right? So if you read mine, this is billing failed. Hey, I mean, look, your business analyst should understand what that means. That means I failed in billing. It's pretty much that simple. But you can see how they're all past tense because in event-driven architecture, you're saying that you're done with something and something happened. But here you see I have commands, start conversion or start billing. And this is basically saying, hey, I need you to do something. So that for me is a difference between, there's 2 types of messages in my world. There's commands and events. Events happened in the past and commands are telling somebody to do something. When you put it in that context, event-driven architecture, I think it's more consumable and usable. So I have these queues and topics all set up, ready to rock and roll. And then I have Cosmos DB here, and I don't think there's anything in it. So we can take a look at my flow events, and this is what's going to track the overall flow, right? So I want to know what happened, right? People want to know, hey, what happened to that policy? Did it convert or not? It doesn't have anything in it now. It's completely empty, but hopefully if the demo works, it will be full of stuff, actually. So let me just show you my application really quick. I don't have this available because it's on my Azure DevOps because I was playing with DevOps. I would have to put this into GitHub, but it's a little bit antiquated anyway because it's only on 3.0 and I'm using what are these things called here? I was using background services, right? I wouldn't do this anymore. Today it would be an Azure function for sure. And so a lot of this wire up code basically goes away because I don't need any wire up code in an Azure or in an Azure function. I just tie the topic to the function and I'm good to go. But I was doing this back then and functions weren't as big back then actually as they are now. Now they're so awesome. So anyway, I have, like I said before, I have this billing system, this conversion system, and this premium reporting system. And so they all have to do their work. And then the conversion tracking has to manage the overall process. Okay, so these are runnable projects at this point here. And so I have them all running, and I'll go ahead and bring them all up so we can see them. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Right. So here's the conversion tracking program. Right. This is the center one. This is the process manager, and then I have my billing system, and I have my premium reporting system, and I have my conversion policy system. So I have all these systems. They're up and running. They've been running since last night, actually. They literally have been, because I did this like at midnight last night, so I could wake up and miss the presentation this morning. Sorry about that, folks. So then we'll go ahead and start it. And when I said is I have an API to start it because I need a way to start it. The way we start it today is we have the mainframe actually post a bunch of messages out there, and then the whole thing gets triggered. But I needed a way to get it started. So what we'll do is we'll do this one here. This one here. Where is it? Oh, I can't see that one. Where is it? Huh, I don't know why I can't see that thing. It's so weird. Is it down below? Is it down here? No, that's my logs. That's what I want to do, but I don't know why I can't see the rest of it. Hold on a second. Let me just close this out and then open it up. Maybe it'll show up. Nope, doesn't want to show up. Close it. Don't save. Well, I guess I did some things. Oh, there we go. There it is. I even saved it incorrectly, so this is actually the right way. Okay, so the body of it doesn't actually add much, but I will point out one thing. So I do like the idea that everybody thinks the database should create the primary keys. That's sometimes they're accurate. Sometimes you don't want it accurate. If I'm going to coordinate between 3 systems, then the person starting it should create the GUID, or the process manager should create the GUID, not those 3 systems, so that I can have this GUID flow in and out of all the different systems. And then this policy number doesn't have to be anything in particular. We will say hi.net. So that way we can see it. And so we will go ahead and send this and then minimize it. Did it work? Yep, looks like it worked. So then let me actually send a couple of them. Let me send one. Well, that was the number 1. We'll send number 2, number 3. Then we'll bring it down. Okay, so here it is now. So this is my process manager here. So the process manager is involved in everything. And you can see how it's taking a little bit of time. That's intentional. I am slowing things down because otherwise it would be done already. But I put in the delay. You can see there's these waiting things. So you can see how these are all converting the policy. And it's basically this transaction is articulating through these different processes. This one here, see how it's done number 3 and now it's working on number 2. And you can see it set this one to completed and it's finished. This one says it's billing succeeded. So the process manager in the middle is getting all the events from all the different systems and it's organizing this workflow, saving things off into hopefully off into Cosmos DB. So that's multiple different systems acting as a unit in a cohesive system. And I love that concept. And that concept is hard for people to get inside of an enterprise. And if you understand that, and you go in there and say, hey, I think I know how to build this. I know how to break apart this thing, have modular components that are orchestrated from a central location, then you can scale the development. And everybody likes when you can scale development, basically. So what happened here? Let's see if we actually got our documents. And we did. Let's see. One of them at least completed, but hopefully not all of them. I put in some random things that fail. So this is the first one we sent. And you can see this is my GUID that I sent. I wonder if they all have the same GUID. Actually, I think that this GUID is from Cosmos DB, I'm pretty sure. I saved the start time and the end time, the total duration. So this one took 38 seconds, which is, okay. That's kind of what we're doing now, but we're doing 18 million policies. So it seems okay. It's in its final state, so it finished, which is cool. The most recent state is that it completed. So I can go to the top and say, hey, this worked. And then I can see how long it took to get through this entire process flow. And I know exactly what happened. Let's see what happened to number 2. Number 2 finished. Looks like they all were successful. So I didn't get anybody that didn't work. I think I'm doing every 7th one or something like that. But If I do enough of them, then it will fail eventually. So that's building business processes in an event-driven way using Azure Service Bus and Cosmos DB. So to summarize, just because remember the purpose of this meeting was that my presentation was that you would understand the difference between the different eventing services that are available in Azure, so that when someone says, hey, I need to build an architecture, you say, okay, what are your requirements? Let's see how we can piece this thing together. You have three choices. You have the Event Grid, the Event Hub, and the Azure Service Bus. You use Event Grid for resource types of events, things that are happening to blob storage or the resource group, or like in my case, the app configuration services. So for DevOps and that type of thing, you can definitely use Event Grid. Use Event Hub if you have a ton of data to suck in and you want to do time series analysis. If you want the consumers to own the pointers, that's something that you would do as well. And then you would use Azure Service Bus if you're doing business events and event-driven architecture. You want to do complicated workflows like I just showed you, or you have a lot of crazy integrations as well. So those are the reasons why you would use Azure Service Bus. So things that I was going to say, things that Azure Service Bus doesn't do. It does a lot of things, but there are things you'll have to do with it. So these, you saw how much code I had in order to do that workflow. So you do need to do things like that. I mean, if you need to do your deduplication, you need to take care of process once types of concerns and transactional boundaries. Those things are still going to be your problem, and you can get like mass transit or end service bus, and it has those patterns figured out for you. So it's really only half of the battle, in my opinion. I mean, it does a lot, and it's great. But there is this client you need to build in order to build an enterprise-wide service bus to make it really work for the company. So it's none of these are silver bullets. There's still a lot of work you have to do, which is good because we get paid to do work. Okay, so that's my presentation, and hopefully you now know the difference between these three services and which one to pick and when. Thanks for sticking with me.
Hey, Steve, thank you so much. It was really great. And it's inspiring me to, I didn't work on this event grids and event hubs or service bus to a decent extent, not to a decent extent, at least a few things I did it, but not this much complicated thing. So it's really inspiring me to get little more information and start using it. That's pretty cool thing. I really enjoyed it personally myself, and hope the folks would have enjoyed it too. Cool. So anything else for us, Steve?
I don't have anything else. No. Anybody?
Oh, there are no queries. I was just saying there are no queries, but all is well. Had a pretty good thing. So the event one which you did, that event grid viewer where the messages comes and the signal pops up the messages. So that thing was pretty good. I would like to try that for sure. And
you want to see something cool? Look at this. I got to figure out how they're doing this, but if you go here, you can download their code so you can see how they're doing it. But they have this deploy to Azure, and it'll automatically deploy it to Azure for you. It's like,
wow.
That's all I did was click this button.
What is that URL? Could you please ping me so I can keep it? So it's pretty cool thing. I would like to do it myself. I really like that demo. Yep, got it. Thanks. So
now you'll know every time I change my configuration file.
Okay. Cool. So thank you so much, and I really appreciate you waking up early to speak from this meetup group, and we really love to host you every month. And a lot of people also, they liked your previous sessions and they wanted you to come and speak more, and you are doing good community service. really.
Yeah, let me know. Let me know how I'm doing. Let me know if I can, what I can do to improve. I like to do these things. I mean, I do them for you, but I do them for me too, right? Like this, to put together a compare and contrast of these things really helps me fortify my architectural skills, so that when I go and have to explain this to people, it's a lot better, a lot more clear. So I'm happy to do this. I'm happy to do these things for you, for sure. But if anyone has any questions, anything you want to know about in Azure, let me know and put together a presentation.
Yeah, sure. You and me will talk offline. We are losing you.
I'm here.
Okay, your voice. We are losing your voice now. You're back. So we have another event on 17th April. Again, your voice is breaking.
I'm not saying anything.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay. So we have another event on April 17th, Steve. So offline, you and me will talk, and we can see that what what we can present it from the Azure perspective. As I'll be presenting the Web API series on the day, April 17th, and we can try what you can present it from the Azure perspective.
Cool. Sounds good.
Cool, sir. So enjoy your rest of the weekend. And again, thank you so much for joining.
Sure thing. See you later.
Yes, thank you all for joining this